I always have fun with Jim, and
even though we hate each other,
we hate each other so much.
Yeah,
But we put it aside
it's right for the cameras.
for the cameras and for the microphones, just for moments like this.
Angle and shake hands.
You gotta do
We
that.
should do that. We should. Peace among podcasters.
It's like Christmas miracle.
Hand sanitizer, please.
Peace
please.
eternal in a podcast united.
Addressing Gettysburg.
Live on SD card from the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center, it's Addressing Gettysburg's 162nd anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg Town Hall, where you, the audience, are just as important as the host and the expert guest. Tonight's guest historian is licensed battlefield guide and author Jim Hessler. And now, here's your host, Matt Callery.
Oh, stop it! Oh, you guys! Oh, no, we didn't ask for that. Oh, no, please. Okay, enough. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the July 3rd installment of our 162nd. I'm just going to keep going. Battle of Gettysburg anniversary shows from the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center. We've had a lot of fun, so I'd like to thank them for allowing us to take over their place 3 Saturdays in a row. Let's have a big round of applause for them. And before we get to our guest and the festivities here, I'd like to point out 2 people in the audience. One is someone you might recognize from the motion picture Gettysburg. He is famous for offering Robert E. Lee flapjacks in small mountains. Over in the back there is Bo Brinkman. Welcome, Bo. Along with him is Chris Webb, and they both run the Gettysburg Film Commission, which is a great organization. And for those of you who have been listening to Addressing Gettysburg for a while, you might have heard us say that we want to convert the masses, not necessarily preach to the choir. If you're in the choir, great, we'd love your support. But we want to try to convert people into this and show them that it's not boring. History is not boring. It's very exciting. There's a lot of interesting things to learn that can maybe even, Jim, I don't know, help us learn about ourselves.
Oh, maybe.
Okay, maybe
Yeah.
if you want to go deep on it, deep
yeah.
in the bull. But I have to say that we need to welcome somebody who was here last week pretty much out of obligation. But this week is here because those of you who were here last week impressed her, I think. Made her feel welcome and made her realize we're not all a bunch of dorks. Well, Brandy is not. Welcome, Brandy. I wouldn't say you're a convert yet, but you've given us a second chance, and we appreciate that. So thank you for coming out, and I hope that you actually eventually become a nerd like the rest of us. So welcome again, okay?
All right.
Okay, so our guest today is Jim Hessler. He most recently put out, or his most recent book that he's put out is the Civil War series, The First Day at Gettysburg, July 1st, 1863. From Casemate, welcome, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you.
He's written thousands of books, right? The Peach Orchard, Dan Sickles, the Pickett's Charge.
That seems like thousands. It's 4.
It's 4.
Yeah.
And his next big work is going to be a tome on the Little Bighorn, right, Jim?
I think
yes,
so,
that's
yeah.
right. Yes.
And Matt Callery is announcing tonight that he will fund me on that effort.
Oh, yes, of course, Jim. Of course.
All right, Jim, you're out. Yeah, all right.
Maybe you should just do it this size. No, but how's the sales of the book going so far?
It's doing well, and thanks in part to the interview that I had on Addressing Gettysburg. That has helped. So
Good.
those of you who have bought copies, I hope you've enjoyed it so far. So thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
And you brought some for people to purchase later
Of
on
course,
tonight. Yes, okay,
always,
good.
always.
All right, so we're going to get into July 3rd, 1863, here at Gettysburg. And the thing that I want to know from the audience is, when you think of July 3rd, what do you think? What words come to mind? What thoughts, feelings, emotions, whatever, anything comes to mind July 3rd?
And I'm going to write down what I hear.
The great six questions. Lentz raises his hand.
Memory.
What?
Memory.
Memory.
Memory. Yes. And what I mean by that is no other day of the Battle of Gettysburg is memorialized or romanticized or remembered than July 3rd, 1860.
Yeah, okay.
Son of a bitch is right.
It is?
He's right. He's right.
Yeah, that's pretty good, Mike.
Yeah.
Just like the movie.
Huh?
Just like the movie, certain things happen other than what's in the movie that are just as, if not more important than what the movie portrays. So the Hollywood or the books writing about Pickett's Charge sees it as a climax. I think it was very anticlimactic myself.
Yeah.
The first day to me is the tactics and troops coming and putting them in the right place as everyone's showing up. There was generalship for that.
Yeah.
The second day, the tactics were based on the terrain. Really.
Yeah.
You couldn't go here, you couldn't do this. And the third day was just come and get it.
Yeah.
You know, it was sort of,
Well,
what else, what was left to do?
You know what's funny though to me is if you just go by the movie, you take Culp's Hill out of July 3rd, right? And it is the climax. But when you go beyond the movie and you learn about Culp's Hill, fighting there all morning, heavy, hard fighting all morning long, 7 hours, something like that, right?
7 hours, yep.
Then you realize, yeah, like Pickett's Charge was kind of like I don't want to belittle it,
Yeah.
but it wasn't the climax.
But we hear that a lot. We hear that a lot, that July 3rd, it's anticlimactic. Not the first time I've heard that. So
Yeah.
we should
Well, so
dive
let's
into that. at some
dive into
point.
it then.
Yeah.
To me, it was like a boxer who's been beaten for 9 rounds and he's on his last legs and then he comes in one more time and boom, he gets
Yeah,
knocked out.
yeah, that's good. I like that.
You know, he's been knocked around.
Yeah, just going off of 6 questions, wonderful word. I was going to say romanticized.
Yeah,
To me, that when you describe it to, if you ask somebody what they think about it, it's usually a romanticized version of what they feel July 3rd is. When you dive into it, there's so much more things, all the way from East Cat Field to Culp's Hill,
Yep.
to all these other things,
Farnsworth's
to
Charge.
just all of a sudden now, Pickett's Charge gets all of the credit, but there's all these other
Shelby
things.
Foote had a
How
lot
many
to do
people
with
knew
that.
that Custer was at Gettysburg, right? That's most.
I remember the first time I learned that. I was so excited because I knew about Custer from Little Bighorn
Yeah.
first,
Yeah.
and I was like, Custer was here, and then yeah,
And
You
so,
never saw they died with their boots on?
I did, but it didn't click with me.
Yeah.
so going off of Geoffrey here, I think if you look, it's not only our generation that memorializes that particular aspect of the battle, the Pickett Pettigrew Trimble assault, but even the veterans themselves
Yes.
had
Well, I thought that's
struggles
what you were
over
talking
the
about,
memory
yeah.
of that event. I mean, look at the Union veterans placing their monuments after the war. 2 decades later, where are they placing their monuments? Cemetery Ridge, and so for them, that kind of develops into the memory of this is how we want to be remembered. This was the flashpoint. And also, John Batchelder. We cannot forget to mention John Batchelder and his influence on how we remember this fight on July 3rd, especially with the high tide watermark of the comparison.
Yeah.
Good.
I mean,
Estella
it's
Beard.
off of some of that too. I would say emotions. There were a lot of different ones going on. I mean, I'm not certain for sure, but the Confederates might be like, here's our last chance to hit them and hit them hard. And then coming back to what Mike said, even with the memorializing the monuments that they brought in, what were the emotions felt then at that point with reunions and all of them who got together? Did they differ from when they were in the battle at the time, opposed to, when they came back for an anniversary to memorialize what they did?
Good.
Well, how many times do you hear the veterans or you read about the veterans saying something like, on July 3rd, I wanted to kill you, Yank, but
Right.
today I want to
Yeah,
shake your
yeah,
hand,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that shift of the emotions,
Yeah.
right?
Very much like our podcast war.
Very much. And here we are celebrating anniversaries
Right.
together.
Exactly.
Should we hug or should we
Well,
not?
later.
Yeah, later. Right? After the cameras
At the
are off,
end.
yeah.
But he would have said the same thing on July 4th the next day too.
Yeah.
I still want to kill you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It wasn't
yeah.
like that day.
Yeah, right, right.
It was a big
right.
change.
Well, imagine the emotions on July 4th. too.
Say that again, Estella.
Imagine the emotions on July 4th too.
Yeah. Well, it was
Everything
still fighting
somber,
a little bit on
it was
July 4th.
raining. There was
Raining.
still some,
Yeah.
but
Holy crap.
Lee is like, we gotta get out of here now. We gotta get them
Yeah.
out of here and do it fast.
Susan.
Yeah.
For the locals, July 3rd was probably another day of uncertainty and dread.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the same on July 2nd and July 4th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, right. As long as those soldiers were there, right?
Yeah.
They didn't know what the hell to make of it.
July 3rd saw two of the more high-profile acts of damage on properties here at the Battle of Gettysburg. The destruction of the William Bliss Farm, and also the damage to the Lydia Leicester house during the cannonade.
Yeah.
And so what you have is, the civilians are being deeply impacted by what happens on July 3rd.
You have another day of Schimmelpfennig, eating the pig slop, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
Oh, forget that.
Well, it's-
So before we get too far away, one sec. Before we get too far away from the memory and romanticizing thing, it's funny that that's what, especially the romanticizing that came to your mind, because it's not like the fighting that took place on July 3rd was nothing. Like
Right.
as far as carnage goes and
Right.
and casualties, like it was pretty rotten, and yet it's romanticized, and so we kind of think of it. You don't hear. I was thinking the other day of Culp's Hill.
Okay.
And that morning artillery bombardment, and it's hitting trees, and trees are falling, or tree branches, or parts of trees are falling, plus the shrapnel.
Yeah.
It's like that's. I mean, we've all seen Band of Brothers, right? When they're in the Bastogne episodes, when the tree burst. Like it's terrifying. You can get killed with a
Yeah.
chunk of tree.
getting shelled in the darkness. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
How many of you have ever taken artillery fire? Well, I haven't either, but I hear in the darkness it'd be pretty rough, right?
Exactly.
Faulkner wrote about it. Until Pickett's Charge, there was still a chance.
Right.
Every
Right.
Southern boy,
Yeah.
is-
Right,
it's
yeah.
for every Southern
But
boy.
once that was over,
Yeah.
they, here at least, it was done.
Yeah. So it was being romanticized pretty early on. Elaine.
So for me, July 3rd is not about the infantry, it's about the artillery and the cavalry,
Okay.
Good.
Definitely artillery. I think of it that way. Yeah.
right? We don't talk about the cavalry and the other, well, I know there's a Buford, but in terms of like cavalry action,
Right.
3rd is where you really talk about those
Yeah.
two others in the dialogue.
Mike Phipps used to call it Cavalry Valhalla, right? Now, Mike referred to everything as Valhalla because he was into Thor. But the idea is, if you want cavalry charges and actual fighting, not Buford fighting as
That's
dismounted
different.
infantry. If
Right.
you want actual mount, it's July 3rd, baby, right?
Yeah,
Right.
And also
Right.
South Cap Field. too.
South Cap. And dare we say Fairfield?
Fairfield.
Yeah.
Was it as big as Brandy Station?
No.
Exactly.
No.
Nobody talks about Brandy Station.
Well, we do.
Well,
we do.
yeah.
Six
Six
Flush
Flush
does.
does.
Yeah.
He does, yeah.
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 I care about Brandy Station.
Also, going back to
Mikey.
Estella with emotion, think of the Union side of the emotion. They've been getting kicked in the teeth for 2 years.
Sure.
Now, they're shaking their fists and yelling Fredericksburg. And that's
Right.
why a lot of people aren't at the Fredericksburg. When it's that one-sided, nobody really,
Payback.
yeah.
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 Yeah. They do.
Turns the tide.
And I'm going off a lane. Artillery has to be another word for that. How many other times in the American Civil War do we have artillery firing almost at range at each other? This is almost Antietam, maybe, but not very often. And this is happening here. It's a dramatic moment. That's the thing, why it lives in memory. It's highly dramatic. It's like a stage play out there. You don't have to build the drama. It's already there.
Right. Right.
2 hours, too.
Yeah. It's right. It's long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike, I think that speaks to the memory of the veterans of if you're laying on the ground or if you're hiding in the tree line waiting to walk out or anticipating this, you know what's coming. For 2 hours, you know what's coming. You're hearing this concussion, you're seeing the fog of war, you're seeing all this stuff, and then all right, now go march, and all right, repel those then. Go ahead, guys, have fun.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're jumping to Pickett's Charge. That doesn't happen till the afternoon, though. So, but what about Culp's Hill? Like, is it something that you're not as well versed on, or you don't have as many thoughts about? And if so, why?
See, and I don't mean to interrupt because I know this is your forum, but I think part of the problem with this is when people think July 3rd, they automatically go to Pickett's Charge.
Right.
And we think of Culp's Hill as like some other compartmentalized thing.
Yeah.
But it's 7 hours of fighting, not on July 2nd, July 3rd.
Yeah.
So I think you gotta start there. And if you do all that, you start realizing July 3rd is a big deal. It's not just one anticlimactic charge. So yeah, it starts with Culp's Hill.
And then that's what, 4 hours the night before that they're fighting there,
give or
right?
take,
So like
yeah.
it's the longest fought over piece of ground there, and it gets no attention, but it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
But it's hard to understand.
It
You know,
is.
even when you ask people that study the battle, Culp's Hill, well, what time, when, who,
Yeah.
you know.
Over so many days.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's not like it lacks drama or lacks those interest stories as well. I was about to mention that too, memory. Complete lack of memory when it comes to the Culp's Hill fight.
Right.
Everything focused on Pickett's Charge. And may I also say in Pickett's Charge, the Virginia side of Pickett's Charge is where memory shifts. But Culp's Hill, I would say, is just as important as Pickett's Charge because if the Confederates break through, there's the Baltimore Pike. So, but the thing is, they're both reinforcing that area. You're still also getting dramatic charges like the poor 2nd Massachusetts and the 27th Indiana who are going over Spanier Meadow. And Mudge saying before going, Lieutenant Colonel Mudge of the 2nd Massachusetts saying, when he's ordered to go and do this, it's murder, but it's the order. And so and then he pays with his life in that charge. So there's a lot at Culp's Hill that it just doesn't seem romantic because one, the sight lines aren't there. You can't look across the field and see the other side. It's forested. Plus, it's against breastworks.
Yeah.
This is what the war is going to turn into. And 1864 and 1865, while it can be romanticized at points, I think that style of warfare meant that Gettysburg was the last time romanticism could enter the chapter.
But that's a whole different thing you go back 50 years, the battlefield tour was Culp's Hill. Right top was the extent. Culp's Hill was the place to be. That was where all of the tours went. And you can still see that when you go and look at where they've cleared out down in there.
Well,
the original chapter.
I was going to mention that, Bethany, because again, part of this idea of modern memory is how is the car tour laid out today? How is the park today designed to show you the battlefield?
Right.
If I'm taking somebody out on a battlefield tour, if for whatever reason we got to skip Pickett's Charge, I feel like I've cheated that person.
Right.
If we run out of time and I can't take them over to Culp's Hill, it's like, hey, Culp's Hill is important, it's over there, kind of thing. And I know as a military historian how important it is to the battle, but the park today is conducive to focusing on Pickett's Charge instead.
Jeff, could you ask a question? So we're all Monday quarterbacks, right, in all of this. So when you look at the people who are digesting what happened, I don't know if it's July 4th or 5th or 6th, what are you seeing them saying about the battle? What are you hearing when you look at it? Is it, are they saying, oh, if we'd done Pickett's Charge or oh, if we'd done Culp's Hill? Is there any dialogue of we woulda, shoulda, coulda?
I don't really, you're talking in the immediate July 4th, July 5th.
Or even like in the records that come after that. Is there any dialogue of, if practicable, we should have kind of gone back.
Yeah, right. Well,
They blame White Street.
If you look at the after-action reports, and this has always been kind of an interesting point with me, because if you get a room full of 20, 21 Gettysburg nerds together today, 19 of them will say, oh, Culp's Hill is much more important than Pickett's Charge.
Yeah.
But I don't see that in the immediate aftermath of the after-action reports. So to kind of answer your question, Elaine, that dialogue is coming up. Lee, in his report, he describes why did Longstreet order an assault? But he doesn't, and he focuses on why that failed and the artillery and that sort of thing. But Lee's immediate after action doesn't focus a whole lot on Ewell and Culp's Hill. And I think we got to take that into account.
So that's interesting, though.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Prioritizing it. He's not saying that it's a place of priority, because up till now it's been a place of distraction, not
Primary.
Right.
Yeah.
When we have guides on the show, everybody always seems to make a point that the key to the Union position is Cemetery and, to a lesser extent, Culp's Hill,
Exactly.
because of the roads.
Exactly.
It's even though there are hills there, I'm going to guess it would be easier for the Confederates, if they could dislodge the Union from their positions there, to take Baltimore Pike.
Right.
Whereas to do that from the from Seminary Ridge, to me, is such a long shot.
And so you're right. We, as Monday morning quarterbacks, as historians, as guides, or whatever, we almost all say that.
Yeah.
Robert E. Lee, so think about this. Did Lee order a major assault against Culp's Hill? Not really. No. Ewell was a demonstration. No. Now on July 3rd, overnight on July 3rd, realizing that we've gained some advantage by getting the bottom of the hill, they do reinforce Ewell with additional brigades on July 3rd. But that's only after sort of, again, realizing we've gained some ground and maybe we can continue to push this with opportunity. But Lee and his, back to your original question, Lee in his immediate after action report at no time says, oh, we realized that was the key and we were pushing all our forces there. Far from it.
Go to Culp's Hill.
Far from it. It's the main attack is against the Union left.
So that is that then the Monday morning quarterbacking? That
I think it is.
Yeah.
I
So
do.
at the time, Lee obviously knew enough on July 1 to say to Ewell, take that hill if practicable. Right. But he's referring to Cemetery Hill, not Culp's.
Right, so he's initially referring to Cemetery Hill, and then Ewell essentially says, no, but give me time for Johnson to come up, and I'll take that other hill, which is Culp's. And as we know, neither one of those happens.
But he's able to recognize the importance of it, at least maybe locally then?
Right.
I mean, he has to know that the Baltimore Pike, he's got a map with him, right?
Yeah,
so he knows the Baltimore Pike is there and where it goes.
Or at least if, okay, now the Yankees are entrenched on this Cemetery Hill, take the hill to the right and knock them off of that hill.
Yeah.
Right?
So is it then maybe that the guides are saying that it's more important, it's the key to the Union position from the Union perspective?
Yeah, I think so.
But not necessarily Lee's.
I think so. And interestingly enough, what did Meade, when Meade testified before the Joint Committee of the Conduct of the War, what did Meade call the key to his position?
Cemetery Hill?
And Round Top.
And Round Top.
Right?
Okay.
So I don't even know. I know Meade appreciated this, but I don't know that when we get to Culp's Hill is the key. I really think a lot of it's Monday morning after the fact. I do.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And again, the Union side, after a few days after, the 12th Corps gets shipped out.
Right.
And the 6th Corps goes to New York City for the riots.
Right.
So there weren't a lot of after-action reports written by the 12th and the 6th Corps during that.
And actually what's happening, right? Slocum and some of these guys in the 12th Corps later are bitching to Meade that they didn't feel like they got enough credit in Meade's report. Like it wasn't on Meade's radar. Yeah. And Meade says, hey, I'm sorry, I can't give everybody credit. Like it's just sort of one of many, many local victories.
Jeff.
So when I'm looking at the morning and you're looking at Culp's Hill, and I'm going to touch on a few things. I could be wrong. Was it not Lee's intent in his report that he did give, say he wanted to continue the actions on the flanks in the morning? And when they didn't happen, for me, when I look at where things shifted, is it coincides with Pickett not coming up early enough, and then the Union side went on the offensive. They got the jump on them. They pushed the squatters off the hill, and it changed
The momentum.
I think it changed the plan. Those two things in my mind, it simultaneously switched whatever action Lee had in his mind. I mean, he doesn't have a council or he didn't talk to Longstreet, he didn't talk to Ewell, and collectively together to coordinate an attack, but Meade did. And then to me, that is where, if I want to remove the romanticism of the Confederate side on July 3rd, is that it's kudos to July 3rd for the Union side is they went offensive, which most people think when you're coming to Gettysburg, this is a defensive battle for the Union sides in my mind.
Okay.
Well, weren't they just trying to retake the breastworks? They weren't looking to push them any further than that.
Right, they wanted to take their
Right?
position
They
back
just wanted the breastworks back.
in the
When
morning.
we're talking
Lower
about,
Culp's Hill?
yeah, when we're talking about they at this point, are we
Yeah.
back to the Yankees,
Yeah.
12th Corps? Yeah, they're trying to basically come back and
Just
reoccupy
that
the
line,
positions
right?
they've
And-
lost,
They
yeah.
weren't looking at an all-out offensive,
Right.
which was what Meade was thinking the day before, and pondering about on the right, on his
Yeah.
right flank.
Yeah, that's basically right.
All right, so the fighting at Culp's Hill is done.
Yeah, 11:30
Okay.
in the morning.
11:30-ish, noonish, whatever. Go ahead. Anything else?
Can we talk
Right.
a little bit about Meade's strategy? We're gonna talk about Lee a lot. But can you just give a perspective on like Meade's thinking, okay, I'll do as much as in my brain, right? I think I have an understanding of where Lee's gonna be. I've got an ability to adjust because I've got a formation that allows me to adjust.
Right.
Where's Meade's head going into July 3rd?
Well, I'll turn that over to you all and see what you think. So the Council of War, starting with the Council of War on the night of July 2nd, what does the Union High Command essentially vote to do?
Stay and fight it out.
Stay and fight it out. So that's the first part of the plan. What does Meade and some of the additional correspondents say that he's going to do subsequent to that during the morning hours of July 3rd?
Wait if the attack, and if he doesn't attack, then go on the offensive
Okay.
later.
And positionally, what's he doing? I mean, he's staying in position. Yeah, kind of redress the lines, adjust the flanks a little bit.
Artillery.
I've got to get a Sickles comment in here,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So you don't have Sickles today, kind of moving forward, but you've got some holes and issues that he created. You got to take care of today.
And
Okay.
redeploying the 6th Corps, breaking it up and sending off in different directions
and-
to shore up his line.
In different directions. What different directions? Where do they go?
Well, eventually Shaler's brigade goes to Culp's Hill.
Right.
But you also have their Weichert Hill, you have backing up, protecting both Wolf Hill and the backside of Little Round Top towards the Town Road.
Yep.
So he's using his fresh corps to kind of shore up some areas
Exactly.
where flanking movements can happen and breakthroughs can come through.
Yep.
They can rush.
So tightening up the left flank, tightening up the right, and then some points in between.
It's almost like Meade saw the movie and, and heard Hood bitching about going around the right.
Yeah, something like, oh,
And then he was like, maybe we should put some troops. We've got more now.
I thought Sickles was offering flapjacks in small mountains. No, wrong movie. I missed that part. Yeah.
He overlooked a lot of other stuff.
That's all Meade said.
Yeah, right.
Can't see the monument.
But then there's also the account. There's also the Council of War, where Meade turns to Gibbon and says, if there's going to be an attack, it'll be on your front.
Yeah.
So he's already thinking that way, if you believe that account. He's
Yeah,
already
that's it.
thinking-
I've always been 50-50 on the
Yeah.
account. I'm not sure if that's apocryphal or not, but we do have that established in the literature. If they attack tomorrow, it's going to be on your front, Johnny. And where's Gibbon? He's in the center, right?
So there's no trees and there's no big rocks, and
Yeah.
there's no swamp, or no lakes.
Don't go.
Give it 160 years.
I feel like Meade on the morning of the 3rd feeling pretty good. You know, like your first question is like, you ever met like somebody who's really into music and they go through their music snob period of time in
Yes.
their life where they say, oh, what, they find out you're into a band and then they say the song they know and then like, oh, well, that's,
Yeah. That's
like-
like their popular music.
I feel like sometimes when you really get into the battle, we all get hooked in a similar way.
Right.
And then, like, for me, it's like July 3rd is like, well, what the heck did he think was going to happen? Like, you put all these men across his feet. Remember, Pickett's Charge. You're just thinking Gettysburg,
Right.
Killer Angels. And then it's like, that's kind of like obvious. Like, how didn't Lee see that? And then to your point, it's like, why was, what was Wolf's Hill about? Why don't I see that? What was Powers Hill about? Like, Meade all of a sudden has this perfect line on July 3rd, and Lee's like, kind of squandered the first. Yesterday didn't work out. There were mistakes. Like, he's in a place of desperation. So for me, it's like, Culp's Hill becomes more interesting because there's more suspense.
Yes.
Like, it just seems so obvious. Like, what would have happened if you always used to say this a few years ago, what happened if you got through at the bloody angle? What would have happened?
Yeah.
It wouldn't have gone that far.
They wouldn't have gone that far.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think Meade knew he didn't have to really beat Lee. He didn't have to beat him back.
Right.
All he had to do was hold and not run, because Lee couldn't stay where he was. He didn't have the logistics.
Right.
So
Does he feel
even
as
a tie is a win.
Do you think he feels as confident as I might think he feels at this point, like on July 3rd? Does Meade want out? He's like, I'm good. Like, I'm entrenched in. My army's here. Like, we've got this. Or is he like, we need to get out? Like, I think at this phase of my love affair with this battle, that
Well, if
Lee
you asked
on the
Dan
3rd.
Sickles, he would have a different answer to that question.
Sickles saved the day on the 2nd. If he never went, we might not have
Yeah, I
won.
know, and somehow I missed that episode. Somehow I didn't get called to do
Just a
that.
speed bump.
Just a speed bump. Just a speed bump.
Can we talk about what success means?
What?
Can
Say that
someone-
again.
Can we talk about what success is?
Thank you.
Because I think we all come to this thinking that it is a battle where you have to win the battle. But Lee's not up here to win a battle. He's trying to win hearts and minds to turn the tide. Like, he doesn't have to win the battle. He just has to shake the foundation and get people tired of it. And the reason I say that is because I've started to look, as people have helped me better understand, and I think you articulated it, right, they could get through, but could they actually win it? And I go, well, this was, like, why did they even do it? Why did they cross the field? Why did they get there if they didn't have the in-depth and they couldn't get there? And there's a part where you go, if he could have just gotten enough to really do more, not completely do the battle, but do enough to say, you guys aren't safe in Pennsylvania, I'm coming for you. What does success really look like?
Political.
Yeah.
I think it had a lot to do with politics, it had a lot to do with supposedly England and France not really coming in. I don't believe they would have sent troops here.
They did.
But they may have supported them a little more, getting through the blockade, sending other,
Or what did the
supplies.
newspapers say the next day?
Yeah, but you can't go by, what do the newspapers say today?
No.
Always this, depends on which paper you read.
I am glad I teed it up so you could say exactly what it said. I'm glad I took the assistance.
Yeah, it's good.
No, but that's why I'm saying, we always come at it because we're in the battle, we love the battle, we're in the battle. But I think we need to think about the politics, I think we need to think about the morale.
No, you're
I think we
right.
need to
Yeah,
think about the
yeah.
bigger picture, because it isn't winning, coming up here to win. Lee at some level knew he didn't have it. He didn't have the reserves, he was spread thin, he was coming up here to
But
try
he
to
could-
continue to try.
But if he's just coming up here to win a political victory, he sure did spend a lot of human capital
Yeah.
in doing
I mean,
so.
what is-
you know what I mean? Like
what's the phrase Lee uses in one of his after action reports? The favorable results that would ensue from the defeat of Meade's army. So just remember that too, because I know friends and colleagues who characterize this as a supply run, and it is. Supplies
Right.
are important, but there is a military objective here, favorable results that would ensue. Now, to your point, what does that mean? Is that a military defeat? You know, we're not going to have a battle where 90,000 men in Meade's army are killed and the army is decimated. But are you going to have enough where the Army of the Potomac is humbled, to use a wrestling term, humbled on northern soil enough to possibly pressure Lincoln to, okay, let's
Get
wrap
enough
this
people to
up.
say, just let them go. Let's
Exactly.
end this.
Wrap
Let
it
'em
up
go.
and let it
The
go.
Vietnam
You know,
syndrome.
Right,
And
right.
that first day, he's almost accomplishing that.
Yeah.
He's chewed up 2 federal corps
Yeah.
already, and that's the thing. He's already on track to what he wants to achieve.
Could I shift thinking just a little bit? Because I've heard at least 3 times Lee is desperate today. He's desperate. It hasn't been working. He's the puncher that's gotten punched in the face for 8 rounds. In Lee's mind, July 1st is a success. In Lee's mind, July 2nd is a partial success.
He's a glass half full guy.
Exactly. He's a
Yeah.
glass half full
Yeah.
kind of guy. So try to shift the thinking a little bit of not viewing Lee on July 3rd as some broken down, defeated old man. He's like, oh, I got to do something. Let's destroy Pickett's division. Before I have a heart attack.
Right.
Yeah.
One brigade almost made it, right? Brigade
Say it again, Brian.
One brigade almost made it. What happens if we bring a whole corps?
Exactly.
Oh, gotcha.
Kind
Yeah.
of like what Grant was thinking, you know.
We go from 1 brigade to 11 brigades. All right?
Yeah.
So
I'm here.
And despite all of that, despite how this ends up, and how bloody Lee's army is, we have to remember that Lee's army it's not a foregone conclusion. He's heading back to Virginia. Right. Meade has to, during the retreat and the pursuit, has to assume that Lee's army is still dangerous.
Yeah.
It still can turn on him, and it can still cause damage.
Yeah.
And it can.
Yep.
And so that's the one thing I think we assume as memory in looking at this from 160 years later is, well, he's defeated and he slinks back into Virginia. For them, that was no foregone conclusion.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, let's not forget also the letter that Lee carried with him to be presented to Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, exactly.
We've never found it.
I think the museum has it in the collection. I don't know. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what, Susan?
It's with Pickett's report.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
right. Probably. And the ash heap of history. Okay, so, but where do you want to take it from here? What? Any other thoughts on where we are, or you want
Who came up with the idea that what JEB Stuart was supposed to do was be on the rear of the?
I think I have an answer to that.
Okay, let's go to East Cap.
Do you know the answer to that?
I've got a couple of different thoughts and theories on it. I think some of it starts with guys like Henry McClellan, who was on Stuart's staff, not to be confused with George McClellan, but
Right.
Henry
His cousin,
McClellan
though, isn't he?
on Stuart's staff. I think Libby Custer is a little bit part of it. You know, my husband saved the Union.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, I think.
No, I said it's his cousin.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said. I thought you said Custer. I'm sorry.
No.
Sorry.
We'll get to Custer.
I was thinking, what did she do with him?
Yeah, I know.
Can we do a mic check on that? But I mean, the Custer myth and the Custer mythology is a big part of that.
Sure.
But where did it start? I personally think it starts with guys like McClellan and some of the other East Cav veterans who, again, they want a memory. You know, hey, July 3rd, Pickett's Charge is getting all this attention, but I fought out here,
Right.
east of town on July 3rd. What we did was big too. For me, I think it snowballs.
Plus,
And then
we're
that-
getting the blame for not being here in time
Yeah,
in the
because
first place
yeah.
and keeping the army.
Right.
Redeem
So
ourselves
they
in
had
that
to
victory.
redeem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And then also it was further solidified in our minds with the electric map,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because the electric map points that out
True.
and the
True.
narration says
True.
that he was going to do this coordinated,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, it's ridiculous in a couple of levels. First of all, Lee's report, Stuart's report don't say that that's the case. And, you got to take that into consideration.
It's pretty good.
And I get it. The after-action reports are not the Holy Bible. People are CYA-ing, but you got to start there. And so the people who are pro-Stuart have kind of concocted this idea that there's some secret mission going on here. And after Jeb got his order to crash into the rear of the Union line, Jeb had to eat the message, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So why is it unlikely? I think you start there. I think you start with the timing of all of this. When Stuart gets his orders to place himself on the flanks, Pickett's Charge, what we know as Pickett's Charge, has not come together as a thing yet. And last but not least, I'll say the distances involved. You're 4 miles east of Seminary Ridge.
Well, how about the terrain too?
Well, that's part of the distance.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, it's
Like
good.
the actual topography.
Yeah. All those factors.
So he didn't get Pickett's Charge hadn't been concocted by the time he got the orders.
Right.
I didn't know that.
And that goes back to what I think it was you who said that, going back to how Lee plans July 3rd. General plan is unchanged. We're going to renew an attack against the flanks. Ewell gets attacked at Culp's Hill before Longstreet is ready. And then we're going to have to think of what I always call Plan B, Pickett's Charge. And I know some guys like Tim Smith, I think, doesn't like calling it Plan B, but that's the phrase we always use. But when all that is going on, meanwhile, Stuart has been ordered to place himself on the flank about 4 miles away. So the timing doesn't really line up for this idea.
And also to coordinate that. So back to July 2nd, I always seem to remember that for a while the story was told that when Ewell hears Longstreet's guns, Ewell is to also attack.
Right, demonstrate.
No. Originally, maybe I misunderstood
Okay.
it. This is going back when I first started getting
Right,
into it, so
okay.
I could have misunderstood it. But I always was under the impression that it was attack, or maybe I just heard demonstrate and I said that's an
That's the
attack.
same thing as
what
an
the hell do
attack,
I know?
right.
But yeah, either way.
Right.
But how do you hear? There's no guarantee you're going to hear those guns, right? And then also, as Longstreet's attack is going up the line, it just stops.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you can't coordinate and attack when you see the brigade to your right going forward and you just stop, now obviously you got to wait for your orders and everything.
Yankee Hill,
Yep.
Yeah. Well, and Pender's taken out. Like there's a lot that goes into that, but like that little thing.
Yep.
You know, it just ended that whole attack.
Yeah.
Now Stuart is somehow supposed to be able to coordinate with Pickett
4 miles away.
Yeah,
right?
and Pickett has such a mountain to climb.
General Stuart, we will meet at the copse of trees at 4 p.m. It doesn't work that way.
Unless
Right?
he was looking to
Right.
stretch the Union line further, maybe to bring it to the point where they could crack it.
But the problem is to get to the back of that portion of the Union line, you got to get through the right flank of the Union line.
And they
Like
had
how,
to
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're,
Yeah.
They
No, I
had to
agree.
know Bennis
Yeah.
Hill, they seen what happened at Bennis Hill. He had to know that the Yankee artillery was, anything that moved
Yeah.
in that area was gonna get blasted.
yeah.
You
No.
know,
Go ahead, Mike.
I mean, we like to make Napoleonic tactics about Pickett's charge. I know Napoleonic tactics were sometimes you set the cavalry in as shock troops and they broke the enemy line.
Right.
But the problem is Lee had never used his cavalry like that
That way.
before in the war. Is he going to use it now like that?
Today's just gonna.
Yeah, today's just going to change his mind. We're going to pull that card out, that club out of the bag. We'll do that one. No, I mean, there's a lot of things too. How do you get to the center of the Union line without being seen? Because it needs to be without being seen. How do you, without being attacked by Union cavalry yourself? How do you? So, I'm not very articulate right now, but some of the issues that are involved with them breaking through at the center are some of the issues that Stuart would have had to get to the rear of the Union Army.
Yeah.
Because you have those reserves still back there. You have Neal's brigade protecting the flank. You have the Vermont Brigade still hanging out back there saying, hey, we matter too. I know we lost only 2 guys here, but hey, we're here too.
Yeah.
You know? So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of soldiers between Stuart and the center of the Union line. And that would have been difficult to get through.
Yes.
Agree.
Yes.
Now, what Stuart does say, because I don't think we should just negate the idea that Stuart is not trying to do anything. If you take Stuart's words at face value, Stuart says, I hoped to effect a surprise on the enemy's rear. So I think when Stuart was given his orders earlier that morning to place himself on the flanks, he's probably told in a generic sense, General Stuart, we will attack today, cut up the enemy, harass them in the event that they retreat in your front. Bethany loves my Robert E. Lee. Yeah, it's brilliant, right? It's the best Martin Sheen I can do, right? But Stuart does say, I hope to affect. So I think in general terms, there's an idea here that, look, if we beat those Yankees today and they're running or do your part, Stuart, to go in and cut them up. But that's not the same as saying, meet me at the copse of trees.
Right, okay.
He's also embarrassed and humiliated.
Maybe looking for.
I think I think in Stuart's mind is, if we look at, he gets blamed, right? There is no time. July 3rd is his time. No matter what he does, he's got to do something, and he's got to make an impact so that way, I feel anyways, that he can go back down south and no one say, well, you're just right around, get your name in the papers.
These are high performance individuals. You're wearing a Bills hat. You think Josh Allen would sit on the sidelines today?
No.
Josh would want to get in the game.
Get in the game.
Right?
Get
in the
Run it
game.
again.
I have a question
Run
for
that
you
play
two.
again.
I mean, up until maybe even like 10 years ago, definitely 20 years ago, a lot of people talked about Stuart was to blame. But I feel in your daily work, do you feel like there's less questions around Stuart than there used to be?
Yeah.
I do too.
Okay,
I do
interesting.
too. I think
It's like he's been exonerated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I've been a guide for 23 years now, and I think so, exactly to your point, when I started, if I would take people out to East Cavalry Field, talk about Stuart, people would be fixated on this idea that this is part of Pickett's charge. 20 plus years later, I'll say to a lot of my groups, hey, do I need to explain that to you? And they'll be like, nah, just move on. So I do think it's changed. Yeah.
And it's weird though, because I guess I started coming here and getting into this as that old, let's say, Centennial, Lost Cause, all that shit
So if you're coming here in the 70s?
No, I'm saying
okay.
it was as that was on the wane,
I got you.
and whatever period we're in now was starting, and so like that's where I was in that transitional period,
Gotcha.
and I remember hearing that a lot about Stuart.
Yeah, okay.
And then I kind of took a break for a few years and went and did other things. And when I got back to it, there was this whole thing. It's like, nah, Stuart, here's the reality of it. And same thing with Ewell.
Yeah, yeah.
Ewell used to get blame. It was Ewell and Stewart
Yeah.
and Longstreet always getting the
Yeah.
blame for everything. And every one of those guys, I think, has been exonerated by a more fair-minded group of historians now. Because I haven't had one person come on the show as a guest and say, you know, this could have been won if Stewart had just, you know.
Right.
It's that 8th grade history teacher
Yeah.
who's just really
Yeah.
getting into
Just wants you to hear
delivered
a
it
good
right in.
story and wants you to get involved and just get the bug. And then
Actually, when I used to come here in the 70s, yes, that bus tour,
Nothing
that
wrong with
double-decker
that.
bus with the
Yeah.
open top,
Yeah.
they were all over you.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Saying, if practicable, they
Yeah.
would say that like 3 or 4 times.
I remember the
They
script.
could hear the picks and shovels working up there.
Yes.
So they played into that too.
Yeah.
There's that phrase,
Yes.
if practicable.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that line from the dramatized in stereo. Yeah.
It's very
Where he played.
That's very like against art of war. Like clear and concise generalship does not include things that are open to interpretation.
Right.
Like
Yes.
that would be like, dude, what did you expect?
Right.
That's not a clear and concise order.
But was Lee so brokenhearted that he didn't take that hill?
Was Lee so brokenhearted that Ewell didn't take the hill? I don't know. How do you mean that?
I mean, according to the movie, he yells at Stewart more than he yells at Ewell.
well, yeah. Well, he yells at Ewell if you have the extended cut.
He does
So which version of the movie?
It's not really a yell, though, is it?
No, it's not. It's a
not.
fatherly talk.
Yeah.
It's a fatherly
Yeah,
scolding.
he's a little bit right.
Trimble
He's
yells for him.
berating Stewart.
Trimble yells for him. Yeah, Trimble takes care of that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I think it speaks back to, you've mentioned it on your podcast several times about like as history has changed, how you have individuals that have lived and died now with a revisionist view of history without actually like a lost cause or
But we'll die, and people will say, "Can you believe those idiots thought
Yeah.
this?"
No.
Yeah.
You don't think so?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No, they say
Thanks to
now.
fine programming like
now.
Addressing Gettysburg. No, they won't say that.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Well, thank you for that kind.
Exactly.
Let's take your
that's
question.
great.
What is coming up? Because we've talked about Stewart, we've talked about Cav, we haven't talked about artillery yet. So can I bring it back to
Yeah,
us?
bring it to artillery.
Because we got to talk about something, right? Because we're here to talk. So what is it? Where is? And it may have been. It was never going to work. Maybe that's the answer.
Yeah.
But what we keep talking about it because it is so much in our memory and it is so much about who we talk about. So
You're talking about when you say we keep talking about it. You're
like,
talking
what's the
about
question? Because everybody's going to come going, "What if?" I know I just said the forbidden words, but
You're right.
we're all going to say "what if," and if the "what if" is no longer Ewell, and if the "what if" is no longer Stewart, then where does that focus now fall as we start to do the analysis?
Rich Snyder.
I have a question for Jim.
Oh,
in
I thought you were
regard-
answering
in
a late.
regards to that.
Oh, okay.
I think the initial plan for Alexander was he was going to move some artillery forward with the infantry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What happens with that? Jim?
Thank you for this question.
Yeah. So I think this ties together well. I think
The artillery moved.
So-
What the guns he was going to bring up was under someone else's command, and when he went to look for them, they were gone. Somebody had moved them.
Okay, so Lee says, so to all three of those points, what Lee essentially says is that the ground gained by Longstreet on the right, note, not on the Confederate left, but on the right, would help us to assault Cemetery Ridge. So what we know today as the cannonade is probably set up to be, or envisioned as being a relatively short bombardment with some of the guns, particularly on the flanks, to be moved forward to protect the flanks, the infantry flanks as they move forward. So to answer your question, Rich, yeah, that's definitely part of the plan. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen for a couple of reasons. One, this cannonade gets longer and louder than they expected it to be, so they start to run low on ammunition. And two, Pendleton, the chief of artillery for the Army of Northern Virginia, does at least move some of the shorter range howitzers back. Now, Pendleton gets a lot of crap for doing that, but he does it because they're taking fire.
The
So that
Union
makes-
artillery
that's it.
didn't just sit there and absorb it, they shot fast.
Exactly. So while they're doing it, so while Pendleton's pulling the howitzers back, I think the real failing is he doesn't communicate that to Alexander. So when you get to the point where, okay, it's time to bring the shorter range guns forward, it's like, shit, where are they? Right? And I think it's a series, I don't want to say a comedy of errors, but it's a series of several errors. And yeah, to your point, the Yankees do something unexpected. They don't run, they shoot back.
Right.
So 45, so it might be a 15-minute cannonade, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, going on 2 hours because of that. Yeah, so it's all of that. So it's a big part. I think, Lee says it twice in my opinion. He says it twice, the charge failed because of failures of artillery. I think that's a big part of it, Elaine.
Okay.
I do.
I mean, you would think that there's not a ton of, this was not Culp's Hill where they're attacking, right? Like, you would think that if they were worth their weight in salt, like, you'd be able to, like,
Smoke.
put some real damage on it, like,
No, but you
crush
gotta
it.
remember, how much can you actually see?
Agreed,
You gotta
but take the
put
smoke.
that in.
Their mindset is they're not entrenched up there significantly. They're sitting in a field. It's not going to take long for me to startle them. The
No, I
smoke
get
gets
that.
in the
I
way.
completely
Are you
get that.
talking about like
Pick
But how
the
long-
salt.
but you're saying the mindset that you're describing there is the Confederate mindset?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Confederate artillery.
You'd have to think like they're sitting ducks.
Well,
They're
I
not sitting
get
ducks
that.
there, but right there they are.
But I know enough to be a little dangerous here to just say, okay, you've got a gun, you know this gun, you've worked this gun, you know the artillery, so hopefully you've got ammunition that's gonna work. But you now need to shoot it, and guess what? Your gun now moves, it's now deeper into the ground than it was a second ago, so you're having to adjust it every time you fire it, and you can't see what's on the other side? Mike, can you, forgive
So
me.
then your theory is that they didn't think it was a rock solid thesis.
No, I don't think, I think you have to understand that, or at least as I'm trying to understand, because I'm in the same place, I'm like, I was just there, this afternoon, I'm like, it's right there, put a shot in it, right? You're professionals, you've been doing this for a while, you guys aren't amateurs if you've been doing it, and I'm gonna pass this over to Mike, because he does a good modern day analogy, which helps me think about it, may I?
Okay, so.
Because I think you're making.
So Matt, you can sleep on this one.
Sports?
This is a sports
All
analogy.
right.
But the way I compare it is like having a professional basketball player where pyrotechnics go off in the stadium during the game and smoke chokes the court. That professional basketball player knows which direction the hoop is.
Yeah.
Can still shoot, but they might not be able to see exactly where it is. So they can judge, they can adjust. And if it bounces back to them, they're like, okay, I can adjust next time and hit again. And so, yeah, that's my analogy.
So what you guys are suggesting then is that they did not have confidence because they knew in the fog of war they wouldn't be able to see.
Well,
I
also,
don't think
Or are you
they
saying
can
that
be
that's why it didn't
effective.
work?
It has nothing
That's
to do
why
with
I'm talking about their
They
mindset.
couldn't
You're
see.
saying they didn't have that
There
because
is
they knew
no
that.
indirect fire in the Civil War, that's accurate.
I would say they were confident enough because they were professionals and these guys aren't amateurs. They've been through many a hard fight. They know what they're doing. We make a big deal about the quality of Confederate artillery versus Union artillery.
Right.
But we have to remind ourselves that these guys have learned on the job. They
Right.
know what to expect. They know how to go into
I
this
get so tired of hearing it was all about the fuses.
Yes,
I get tired of
exactly.
hearing that.
And
Yeah,
so
sorry.
for me, and maybe I might be wrong about this, but this is almost unprecedented. You have, and this goes back into the confidence, you almost have 150 cannon pointed in one area.
I like to think 159.
Give or take.
I mean, that's the largest concentration of artillery to that point in the American Civil War.
But they're only firing something this big too, don't forget.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not like they're bowling balls.
But if you see all the batteries lined up to your right and to your left, firing off at the same time as you are or close to it, don't you think you're going to have some confidence they're going to do some damage?
No, sure.
Well, you don't see much.
Then I
then.
apologize,
Yeah.
because I thought you were talking about effectiveness, not confidence, because I would agree with you that they have confidence. So my comment was more on could they be effective
Oh,
with that
I
confidence?
completely understand why it was difficult to execute, but just in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
moment, are they thinking like this is like they're
Oh,
entrenched
yeah.
on the hills, they're entrenched on the other hill,
It's right there.
I can get it.
Yeah, it's right
Well,
there.
do you think Robert E. Lee ever looked across and said, oh man, they're all still there? this is probably not a good idea.
He might have tried, but the smoke didn't clear.
Yeah.
That's to say,
I
but
think he knew,
By
I
the
think
time-
he knew that
he
I mean,
wasn't
the
there for the
Union was
beginning of the
still
cannonade, was he?
back,
Say what now?
I believe Lee wasn't there for the beginning of the cannonade, so,
Stop.
right?
Sorry?
I
He
believe
wasn't-
was not at the beginning
Where
of
was
the
he?
cannonade. He was at his
back at-
headquarters, then came down after the cannonade started, I feel.
Well, we don't, ironically, we don't have a lot of good placement for Lee during this. There's always been that tradition. He watched much of it from the Virginia Monument. There's
From the outhouse.
yeah, that too, actually.
Sure.
What's
But,
going on out there? How you doing?
but I do want
Maybe
to.
some more pain.
There's an
1
account.
minute.
There's an account where later on Longstreet is interviewed. I think it's one of the newspapers, so take that with a grain of salt. Longstreet's interviewed later, and somebody says, General Longstreet, if you thought this was such a bad idea, why didn't you call it off? And what did he say? The commanding general was on the ground right behind me, and if he didn't call it off, I didn't have the latitude to call it off. So whether Lee had that oh crap moment with the glasses, he doesn't call it off.
One of the things in your book, Jim, that I really liked, if I recall right, is, Longstreet's kind of passing it off to Alexander. He's trying to.
Yeah.
He's really trying to, which strikes me as interesting. But Alexander sends 2 messages to Pickett. And in the first one, he's talking about it not having effect and they're not moving. And then the second one, he says that batteries are leaving Cemetery
Yeah.
Hill. They have left. He says, if you're going to come now.
Right.
So he had to see something, and I don't know if, you don't have any corresponding that Army of the Potomac moved anything from Cemetery.
They were replenishing the ammunition.
Yeah.
They changed the
Yeah,
battery.
right.
The first Rhode Island battery B gets pulled out and Cowan's battery gets put back in to replace.
Yes.
So
I
that's
love
what he
Cowan.
sees.
That's probably what he sees. Not a large scale, but again, in the smoke and the fog of war, you see some guns coming in, coming out. Look, you're Alexander, you're thinking, I'm on the hook here, and
Plus, he's almost
Yeah.
out of ammunition.
plus is almost out of ammunition.
Pretty
Yeah.
soon, I'm gonna
Yeah.
stop shooting.
Yep.
There's
So
not
you-
more I can do.
So you got to come now.
And Hunt orders them to cease firing.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
right.
that's huge. Like that's a chess match all day. Like that.
Right.
The artillery duel between Alexander and Hunt is extremely fascinating
Yeah,
just to watch in
yeah.
itself.
That's
And
Hancock
Hunt
ordered that.
instructed those guys on the other side, and
Because he
that's
knew what was
it.
happening.
Yeah.
And going on Tom's point here about Hancock and Hunt,
Yes.
which batteries are continuing to fire, even in that disagreement,
Yeah.
which are the Second Corps Artillery Brigade batteries are still firing. Look at the casualty rates for the Second Corps Artillery Brigade. Those are some pretty high rates.
That's exactly it. So I bristle a little bit when people say the Confederate cannonade had no impact. Tell that to the Second Corps batteries in and around that end of Cemetery Ridge. They're the highest Union artillery casualties at the Battle of Gettysburg. But is it enough of an impact to stop the charge? No, it isn't.
I mean, and as to that, with Longstreet, who had the feelings of the way he did, it just seemed like he had no confidence, like he was just nervous about sending men forward. Do you think any of the others would have sensed that?
He was a fighter, though, because even it's proven out at other places like Chickamauga. When he puts his men in, he puts his men in. He goes. He knew. The guy was a professional soldier.
Yeah.
So he'd seen, like he said, I've seen, groups of 15.
Estelle, can I say that how much of what we see of Longstreet is to idolize Lee?
Yeah,
Because I think
I know.
how much we think of Longstreet is that somebody, and Longstreet did a lot of things after the war to definitely
Right.
not
Oh, yeah.
not endear himself to his
Yes.
southern neighbors. Let's
Yeah.
all put it that way.
Yeah.
But it couldn't have been Lee's fault. Like that's the
Right.
gift that
So you
I
gotta-
think
And
we're
that's
getting.
what I-
Like to take it back to what you guys were saying in modern day talk and where we
Yeah.
are in modern day and where
Right.
we are. I think we need to take a step back and say, let's just somebody else told me that you're gonna fail if you think past successes indicate future outcomes. And he did it to help me reframe how I was thinking about Lee. And I still haven't completely digested it because I've
Right.
got all the Longstreet and Lee in my head. But when I start thinking like that, I go, do I need to look at it with a clear set of eyes and take, it's different, because how much did Longstreet really hesitate? Or was he really still actioning what he went to Lee and go, okay, boss,
Listen, yeah.
you know, I just
Yeah.
wonder, I just
Yeah.
wonder.
It's a good point, though. Like, people had to knock down Longstreet in order to prop up Lee.
Yeah, well, Longstreet didn't help himself.
No, he didn't.
No,
But that's after the
that
war.
wasn't.
But after all those people are dead, it seems that notion still continued for a while. You know, that
Well,
long.
it's the lost cause.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
We lost, let's blame Stewart, we'll
Stupid
blame
lost
Ewell,
cause.
and
Yeah.
we'll blame Longstreet, and we'll blame this guy and this guy, but it's Robert E. Lee.
Yeah.
But the
Right.
buck stops,
When-
I'm just saying.
When when your baseball team doesn't do that, they don't fire 26 players, they get rid of one to manage it.
Yeah.
So,
And I
Just
mean,
saying.
well, let me ask you, is there anybody here, because we're all, I think, Yankees, right? We're all from the North, bless you.
Depends
We're
how
all,
you define the North.
you're not from the North?
I'm from Virginia.
That's why she sneezed.
What
You
part
said
of
Yankee.
Virginia?
Why she wanted to do something else.
We say here. we
What
say
part of Virginia are you from?
Manassas.
That's kind of the North. I went to school in Fairfax, and one of the kids in my school was from North Carolina, and I said, I love living in the South. He's like, boy, this ain't the South. And I was like, oh, okay. So, and Manassas isn't, but okay.
I think he got another.
Well, we got
right there.
Texas. Yeah. Well, so the reason I'm asking is because,
I grew up, he was gone.
so that's where I was going with it. So Bo just said when he grew up, Lee was God. And I know from my family in Virginia and other people I know from Virginia, you know, I mean, they just recently renamed the Mosby Heritage Area to like the Virginia Drunken Wino Country or something like that. So, right, you know what I'm talking about?
Virginia Heritage.
Oh, that's it.
That's real close.
Whatever. But my point is, though, like, I'm just wondering because we all seem to be kind of, and rightfully so, kind of like down on the lost cause and how our history has been perverted by that. But is there anybody, and you're among friends, including you, Bo. Is there anyone here who thinks the lost cause is not bullshit?
Matt, I would just say one thing.
You think that,
I
Jeff?
don't think that.
Oh,
I think
okay.
what people miss out, like most wars, the 94 to 9, whatever the numbers, the 94 to 96% of the Confederates who didn't own slaves didn't think they were fighting for slavery, and the people who helped perpetuate what you would call the lost cause are their descendants. Doesn't mean they didn't fight for slavery.
Right.
Right? Do we
Yes.
fight for oil or do we not fight for oil? Do we fight, like,
Right.
whatever we fight for?
Yes.
Sure, we know the people who funded the war, what their
It's
primary
not why you
objective.
signed up, but that's what the
But
war
I
is
think that's,
for.
when we call it
Right.
lost cause, I think you just do a disservice to, like, those people, because their ancestor in their mind did not fight and die for a slave. They never saw one. They never met somebody who owned a plantation. So I think when you just continue to, like, it doesn't help the conversation to call it that.
Well,
To
95%.
call it the lost cause?
Yeah, I mean, that in their memory of that, the ancestor was a poor man from a farm who never owned a slave.
Oh,
Didn't
I see
think
what
he
you're
was fighting
saying.
for a slave.
So when you have
the politicians were fighting for it.
Yeah.
I'm just
So
talking about the
what
soldier.
you're saying then is that when you have a person, Joe Schmo off the street, who repeats something that we all know to not be true, that maybe deifies Lee, or maybe it's just something that is just part of the lost cause mythology, that he's just proud that Grandpappy Jessup, you know, fought for the 8th Texas.
He knows
or-
what he
but
thought his
couldn't care
grandfather
less.
fought for.
Yeah. Okay. Go ahead, Susan.
You're saying we're down on the lost cause, but we've just spent how long discussing what made the Confederacy lose, not how Meade and Company won.
I'm glad you said that.
Great. Oh, I see what you're saying. Good point. Yeah.
Because as I was sitting, it's this turn to the lost cause. I was thinking in my head, but think about how the lost cause and Pickett's Charge got entwined together, right? And it's kind of starting to get to what you just said, right?
But right, and that so you're saying that the whole time we've been talking based from the lost cause perspective. It was Lee's battle to lose. It was
It
Lee's
goes
war
back
to
to what
lose.
Mike
Yeah.
said. If I may, this is about memorialization. We didn't memorialize Meade.
Yeah.
We didn't.
No.
No,
Yeah.
we gave him a congressional hearing. Congratulations, thank you for doing exactly what we needed you to do.
Right.
2 to 3 days after getting the job. Job well done.
And we're gonna
Then
rip you
go talk
apart.
to Congress for us?
Because
But
Dan
it's the-
Sickles says.
He blamed, he-
Well,
Yeah, he blamed
no, but what I would say in the bigger picture, because I think people forget the big picture on that. command of the Army of the Potomac is not good for anyone's career,
Yeah.
right?
Not up to that.
Right, not up until that point. And the only reason why Meade becomes less of a target is because Grant comes east and kind of shoulders a lot of that and takes it off him. So bigger picture, but in the bigger picture, you're right. We don't memorialize the Army of the Potomac leaders until Grant comes in. And as we know, Grant's general of the armies, but you got what I'm saying.
I think also a lot of the soldiers in the South, most people during that time, 80% of people never left more than 4 miles from their house. So I think they thought they were fighting for their state, their homes, their land. That I don't know if they thought people were going to come down and take everything away from them.
I mean, there was that great scene in the movie. Can we go back to the movie for a second? It's like Billy Gang, is like, like the red lights. No, but I think I'll give credit. There was somebody. It helped me there. That I remember listening, and I'll give him credit. Was Matt Atkinson was saying, if your home is, and so I will say I'm a very proud New Mexican. So, and if somebody knows that they're going to come in. Well, thank you for that reaction.
I've never said that to a New Mexican.
We're pretty proud of where we come from, but I think we all are at some level, right? And I think that's why I think your comment is, I'm glad you brought it up, because if it's about home, yes, I'm a loyal American and I'm proud of our American heritage, obviously, because we're here, but if it's home, I'm sorry, that's a different ballgame.
Well, I can address, I mean, I was in the Army a million years ago, 1977 to 1980. There were guys from Georgia who actually had a direct link back. Sherman burned their farm down. And you would have think it just happened yesterday.
I know, yeah.
I grew up in the 60s and 70s. And I mean, when I was a little kid, I used to sit on the front steps of my great-grandparents' house and listen to stories about the Civil War. And growing up in Houston, Texas, which is at the end of the Deep South, I mean, it's at the end, right? There was a lot of animosity towards Yankees still, me growing up as a kid.
Yeah.
A lot. It was pretty amazing. And when I first wanted to move to New York, when I was in my 20s, my mother was like, oh, you don't want to do that. But the Yankees up there, they're rude and they don't, you don't want to go up there.
That's right.
It wasn't a facade.
You came anyway.
I loved it. My son was born in New York City. There you go. Against my parents' wishes, they were like, they wanted my son born on southern Texas soil. Wow.
Yeah. But I mean, my wife and I, we lived in the Dallas area in the mid-90s, and my people our age had all been taught in school that it was the War of Northern Aggression. And to the neighbors, we were the damn Yankees in the neighborhood. They said it with a smile, but you could tell they wouldn't mind cutting our throats too. But so this was our generation 20 years ago.
One more point about that is, this is what Ron Maxwell told me, casting Gettysburg. No Southern actor wanted to play a
Yankee.
Soldier.
Not one. Yankee.
Huh?
You just gave yourself away. You said Yankee.
Yeah.
But it is interesting because if the more you learn about the Civil War, the Yankees weren't really nice.
Nobody was nice.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point.
People aren't nice.
You could see why they still hate them after what they did to their homes.
That's a good point.
I would, I would feel the same way.
And contrast that to, in general, how Lee behaved in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yes,
Big
you had
difference.
looting and stealing from the farms, but at least at an official level, Lee has said we're not going to do any of that. And, that's part of...
Hearts and minds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they were paying Confederate money.
Monopoly
Well,
money.
that's good. It's still good currency, right? Yeah.
So, all right. So we started talking about, I'm sorry, what'd you say about?
I said they got paid, so they weren't stealing.
Right. We started talking, you brought it to artillery, and then we kind of went off. That's my fault. But so let's go back to artillery, though, because we want to talk about the cannonade. So go ahead. Cannonade. Any thoughts on the cannonade, the plan, Lee's plan? Yes. A little louder, please, so the mic can hear.
Really related to cannonade, but during Pickett's Charge, during that, they could hear the cannons from Yeah, here's.
Oh, to the distance. Yeah. Dude, do you believe that?
I don't know, maybe, I used to hear Annapolis, I used to hear Pittsburgh. I think Harrisburg is maybe a little more believable.
I
but
think the
don't
Sioux
know.
claim they heard them out on
Yeah,
the
out
plains.
west. Yeah. So that does give you an idea, though, how big it was.
Yeah. Do you believe that they heard it, or you kind of do?
Yeah.
I live over in Hershey, and whenever Fort Meade Town Gap does their live fire exercises every year, which is over by Lebanon,
Yeah.
which is a bit of a ways away.
It is.
You could hear it in Harrisburg very clearly.
Really?
Yeah, the Harrisburg Police Department has a message. So if you call the Harrisburg Police Department and say, "Hey, I hear an explosion,"
Yeah.
they're like, automatic. Fort Meade Town Gap is doing live fire
Wow.
exercises.
Okay.
Now, granted, these are modern.
Modern. Oh.
But
Okay. So, do they have any theories as to what would have caused that for it to be heard all that distance away? Is it some atmospheric thing?
Acoustic something.
Shadows.
Shadows.
Acoustic shadow. But is it acoustic shadow? Oh yeah, because they couldn't hear it in Cashtown, but they could hear it in
Yeah.
Philadelphia, right?
I mean, I hear it when
That
I
makes
hear it
sense.
from West Point. My house, I'm 30 miles from West Point.
Okay.
25, 30 miles.
Do you really?
Water helps
Yeah, I
it,
can
bro.
hear it,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well,
It
maybe.
comes up the Hudson. Yeah.
Maybe.
But I got something sticking in my head now about artillery because nobody bit on what that lady said back there, which was, why did Meade win? And how does Union artillery play into that? Anybody? Why did Meade win? How does Union artillery play into this? Instead of talking about the failures of the Confederate artillery, right?
He didn't run.
Right.
Henry Hunt and the ammunition tree.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And the strategy with the layers. Long-range ammunition, and then, as you get hole for canister. I think he was waiting for this moment.
Yeah.
I think he was thinking about it for years, saw what happened in Fredericksburg, and I think he was ready and prepared. I think the results, speak for themselves.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess would it help that he had an army reserve of artillery where Lee didn't, right?
That's what I was saying about
That-
Hunt. With that.
They were replacing batteries, so they had plenty.
Exactly.
Is that part of the fish hook?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were on the
Meade
same
and-
farm.
Meade empowered Hunt to do his job for the entire
Yes.
Army of the Potomac. And Hunt capitalized at the moment that the Army needed him the most. He was licking his chops, in my opinion, waiting for this cat and mouse game. I mean, with Alexander on the other side.
He's
I
had,
mean,
yeah.
his argument with Hancock, the cojones it took to stand up to him and look, I don't care if you guys are getting shelled. You're gonna wait 15 minutes. We're gonna let them start, and then it's our time to shine.
Yeah.
And Jim, can you talk about the difference that Hunt is being used by, say, how Meade is using him, as opposed to how Joseph Hooker used him?
Well, I was going to touch on that, because in past organizations, Hunt was in more of a staff capacity. You didn't necessarily have an army-wide reserve, and I think what you just said is 100% right. Hunt has been chomping at the bit, foaming at the mouth for his opportunity to say, look, give me army-wide responsibilities. Now, we can argue, and I think some of this comes back to the Hancock debate, we can argue, is he really staff or is he more in an operational function? But at least at the bigger picture, this is Hunt's opportunity to kind of command an army-wide reserve, to have some authority and some teeth into it. And I think July 3rd is a great example of that, at least until he butts up with Hancock.
And we see that too with the replacing of the batteries, right?
Yeah.
Rhode Island B gets taken out, then Cowan's battery from the 6th Corps gets brought up to replace. That's that effectiveness of the fish hook that Bo brought up, is you can bring in those resources easily enough to replace damaged batteries that are being impacted by the Confederate cannonade.
Because it goes into, I'm going to quote, I think Doug Dowdge just said it recently, is that you have to plan, and depending on how effective your plan is, that will depend on how much you have to adjust. And I can't help but continue to look at how Meade set up. I don't care if it's when Meade's on the field, so day 2 and definitely day 3, he sets up so many options for all of his people to adjust. You can't do that on the Confederate line. You can't move those batteries. You don't have the roads. You don't have the ability to move, like, you're,
You've got the exterior lines, you've got longer
You've got-
distances,
yeah.
right? Right.
And going to Hancock Hunt
Yeah.
conflict there.
Yeah.
This is interesting because Hancock is trying to order one of Hunt's batteries to fire. And Hunt's going, no, 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 that's not your authority. That's not your area. That's mine. You don't have the authority to order that. And so there's that confrontation.
So the Hancock Hunt confrontation always comes up in these artillery July 3rd conversations. And the fact that we're arguing about it still 162 years later, I think makes it clear that the lines of authority there are not clear. So I'm kind of curious what the temperature in the room is. Team Hunt versus Team Hancock? Where do you guys kind of come down on that debate?
you want to raise some hands?
And one of the things, I was researching Henry Hunt, and I never realized he wasn't at the July 2nd Council of War. And the reason he wasn't was because Meade had him out, checking the lines, refreshing everything, put everything up that you need to do.
Right.
So I think, like a lot of things, it was in Meade's mind, but I don't know that he ever articulated that to his corps commanders.
Well, do we think, so, in what I've learned so far, I have not heard of somebody who doesn't know artillery, and I'm talking about the Ewells, I'm talking about the Hancocks, who can use it effectively. They tend to order the artillery and it doesn't go well. It's when you let the professionals be professionals, Hunt included, that things go better. So, to answer your question, for those reasons, I'm Hunt.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I'm Hunt.
I'm both.
Definitely.
I think both of them did what they felt they needed to do.
I think it's both. I think it's chain of command.
Yeah.
Because the Second Corps Artillery Brigade is under Hancock's authority,
Right.
but not the reserve artillery.
Right.
That's under Hunt's authority.
Exactly.
And you're giving the men a spine who
Right.
are laying behind that wall under shelling for an hour.
Yeah.
Right.
You're telling them, yeah, we are firing back. We're here. We're backing you up.
Yeah.
And that's-
So then,
yeah.
okay, so then I have a question. When, what?
They have the ammunition, use it.
Yeah.
Right.
They'll take it.
They
So-
had to fire back. I mean, they were shooting into Joshua Jesus Chamberlain, and he was on the ground, and he was in the movie. It has to be real.
Right. Well, then the bookie falls asleep. So.
Nice.
While his brother was going on, or he just come back from finding that Buster died.
Buster, they're crying out Buster.
So, so Hancock's in charge of the corps artillery, not the reserve artillery. But Hancock is a major general. Hunt is a brigadier general.
Yes.
But Hunt is attached to the army, so Hancock can't order him to do something. Is that how that works?
I think to this day that is an unclear argument, but I think basically to me the chain of command is one of these guys. Maybe Mike said it. Hancock has got Second Corps artillery. Hunt's got the reserve.
Right.
And when they and the reason why these two guys in part are butting heads, because you kind of get to this zone where the Second Corps artillery ends and the artillery reserve line begins, and now you have them trying to give each other's guns orders.
Yeah.
So, but I think I like what you said too, Rich, because I think Meade's got it in his mind. I think Hunt thinks he's commanding all the artillery on the field, but I don't think that's clear to the corps commanders. It, it could be communicated better, and it isn't.
Meade's eyes and ears at the front, as any staff officer, just like Warren.
Yeah, right.
He's allowed to he's given the latitude to make a decision. Of course, it's gonna butt heads, especially with somebody like Hancock.
Right.
But for the losses of the Second Corps artillery, do they have any numbers on how many were actually killed or injured when they pulled the batteries back behind the hill and the Confederate artillery was overshooting the line? Were they taking casualties while they were replenishing on the backside of Cemetery Ridge?
Yeah, they are taking casualties on the backside of the ridge, but I don't know that I've ever seen a number attached to it.
I'm wondering if they took more on the backside than when they were on the front line.
I tend to think not, because you look at somebody like Cushing's battery, they're taking the hits on the front line. Arnold's battery, Brown's battery, guys like that. So I tend to think they're taking their biggest hits on the front lines, but it's a fair point. Because at the end of the day, I don't know that we really know what we take on the backside.
That was part of the problem with the Confederate losses too. They didn't know which day, how many men were lost from each regiment on each day. They just took the total at the end of 3 days.
Right.
Didn't they know we wanted to overanalyze this 160?
Did they know they were
Probably,
the,
because they were probably overanalyzing the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812 at the time, the Mexican-American War.
This down.
People don't change.
I mean, AI can't help us right now.
No. So when you read accounts from the Union soldiers who are on the receiving end of the bombardment, how does that move you in any way? What is that?
That's a horrible time.
Yeah.
That is not.
Kidding?
It's one of those cases. One of the narratives that really annoy me is the Confederates are overshooting, so it's fine.
Yeah.
No, these guys are. All they can do is hug dirt and hope they don't get hit.
Yeah.
That's it, and that's for 2 hours. Not only that, but they're dealing with the concussion from their own artillery that's causing them to have, in some cases, their eardrums ruptured and bleeding, and it's bad. I mean, North-South Skirmish Association, thank you for doing the shoots in November.
Yeah.
That was
That's
fun.
fantastic.
Yeah.
And shooting off that 3-inch ordnance rifle.
Yeah, right.
When I shot off that full load of the 3-inch ordnance rifle, the ground rumbled underneath my feet. Imagine 100 of those.
Yeah.
And
with a
then-
full charge.
And then going for the full charge,
Yep.
going for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Those men would not be having a good time.
But a lot of them fell asleep.
I was going to mention that, because somebody talked about him shelling St. Joshua in the movie. Remember, there's a book attached to that movie. What happens in the book? If I remember, Chamberlain falls asleep in the book. That's a real phenomenon. I want to say it's in Stannard's brigade. Some of the guys, maybe it's Stannard himself, but somebody mentions many of the guys just fall asleep.
Exactly.
Is that the vibrations rumble in your brain or something?
Exhaustion more than anything.
Wait.
Exhausted.
Not all at once. Okay, it's exhausting.
You've never really been tired.
I've never been tired. No.
That's an interesting. My father was in World War II, and he was in 7 major battles in the South Pacific, and he was on twin 40 mm, the twin anti-aircraft gun.
Yeah.
And he said that he said, first of all, it would shake your insides up, is what he said. But there was an issue of men falling asleep during the Battle of Lady Gulf, which was with the kamikazes were first introduced, I believe. And it was because they were fighting day and night. And he said that there was one of his sergeants or whatever, captains, went around with a gun, and it was a threat to kill you on your spot if you're caught falling. So they were literally threatening them with to be executed on the spot if they fell asleep at their post on the gun. So there were men falling asleep behind the guns. So that's valid.
I fell asleep during the root canal, so.
I've done that. Yeah.
So
They're like amazed that I'm such a good dental patient. I'm like, it relaxes me. Sorry.
I fell asleep on the back of a motorcycle.
Have
as
you
it
really?
was moving.
Was somebody in the front?
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
Thank God.
this might have been one of the only times in the American Civil War where people would actually want to go on the skirmish line.
Yeah, right.
Like,
It's just going over your head.
Get up, still over there.
So, and the other thing I remember that stuck with me was that they couldn't hear each other. They'd scream at the top of their lungs till their horse right in somebody's face. Like you'd have to go right into their ear and scream. I can't imagine that cacophony and the rumbling of the ground and everything like that. It's crazy. And
You have to
then,
remember too, it's a lot more spread out than what we see on the battlefield, the guns and.
yeah.
They were 14
Yes,
yards
that's a
apart.
good point.
So good.
The monuments don't reflect what that size is.
When average battery of 6 guns, they were 14 yards apart.
Yeah.
So they were long lines.
Yeah.
It's like a football field.
It was long, yeah.
And well, let's flip it on the other side. So the Union is shooting back. What about the Confederate infantry? They're waiting to go into this assault. What's happening with them?
Well, they're getting it too.
They're in the woods and the overshoot.
Yeah.
So Unions, I mean,
That's the one thing, but you just bring up the 14 yards, and that's the one thing the movie, I don't think, They had them lined up hub to hub.
Yeah, they kind of do.
Yeah.
Right?
And that bugged me.
That's for cinematic.
Yeah.
I know that, Bo, but it stinks.
In World War II movie, they show tanks lining up.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like packing everybody on camera tonight to make it look like the room is full, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the camera goes back.
Exactly.
It's all trickery.
It's all trickery.
All right, where were we?
Artillery.
Something about cannons. Something
Yeah.
about sleeping. Yeah.
Boys with toys.
You were on Confederate receiving.
Oh, the receiving end. Thank
And I
you.
think that's an interesting point because what keeps me up at night, because I've read about it in Napoleonic War, just canister.
Oh, yeah.
I can't imagine what it would be like to the randomness of the violence.
Yes.
Because it's like a giant buckshot, so you be with a bunch of guys and you can literally
Well,
evaporate.
what's that movie? I think it's a Russian movie, and they depict it in what the hell is it? What's the event that it's depicted?
It's in one of the squares.
It's in a square.
Well, Moscow,
Yeah.
And it was a couple of regiments of mutineers.
Right.
And they lined them up and they said, if you don't disperse, we're gonna hit you with grape.
Right.
I can't think of the name of it, but if you Google it on
It's
YouTube.
horrifying.
It's horrifying.
Yeah,
It's-
and then there's also YouTube videos where they actually fire a canister out of a Napoleon at some like cardboard cutouts, and the sound. I'm big on sound.
Yeah.
The sound of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just this ugly. It's so dead. Like dead meaning like there's no warmth to these sounds. When we went again to the North-South Skirmish Association shoot. Now I had the flu or something, COVID or whatever this year. The year before I went, and they let me put my recorder down at the end at the target.
Right.
And I remember I couldn't wait to hear it. And then when I actually played it, it was I don't know the word. I keep saying dead, but it's a cold sound.
Okay.
It just does what it does, and whatever gets in its way, it takes. And it was just this, in the movies, it's like a big,
Yeah.
but in reality, it's a.
It's a zip. It's like a zip.
Yeah, it sounds like you would think a bullet sounds like, but a bullet, I have some recordings of those, and those sound more like, like the musket ball, the mini balls. But the artillery was like a bullet sound, and it was weird. And I try to play with it to make it sound deeper, but no, that's Hollywood screws with that. Your people deceive us, Bruce. Bruce.
At least the second husband.
I'm getting all of her husbands confused. Sorry. I don't know why I said that. I'm sorry. Folks, if you like coffee, you have to get Addressing Gettysburg's Little Ground Top. It is roasted right here in Gettysburg. So that means it's like historic coffee beans or something like that. I don't know. But it's through Bantam Roasters. Aaron, you were just saying how you love the smell.
It smells wonderful
It
sitting
does
here.
smell wonderful,
It
right?
really does.
But you don't drink coffee.
Even still.
But even still, you would have this just in a bowl, like as a potpourri type of a thing, just to freshen the room.
Vastly better than potpourri.
It
Yeah,
is
it's
vastly
good-
better.
Yeah.
You should get a bag and put it in your office, right? Then just have it there. People go, oh, your office always smells so nice. That's because that's just Little Ground Top. I don't drink it. It's just there as an air freshener. And I think your wife would like this, though.
She would.
You know what? Okay, you can take a bag with you for your wife.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay, you got enough here for.
Well,
I was going to
you're
go
gonna
buy
have
it,
to
but-
take it later.
Okay.
Because I
I'll
need
come up
four
and-
there.
You need four
Yeah.
there.
So that, but yeah.
Where is it sold? It's here in town.
It's here at Bantam Roasters. So that's 82 Steinware Avenue, right here in Gettysburg. You can go down there and get it. Or where do you live?
Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Louisiana. It's so far away. It's going to be hard to come here twice a month to get a bag of coffee, right? You can go to addressinggettysburg.com/cafe, and you can also get a bag of Little Ground Top. And I'll tell you something. It is selling like hotcakes. They can't keep it on the shelf in the store. People love it. I think honestly they buy it first because the name is kind of cute,
Yeah,
you
it
know.
is very cute.
But then they try it and they go, God damn it, this is pretty good coffee. So they come in and they get some more. And I know we have people who order it. They subscribe to it on through addressinggettysburg.com/cafe. They get it every month. They can't stand it. In fact, just this morning a guy sent me a picture of the bag of Little Ground Top. He had something on TV, and he said, best way to start Father's Day weekend. He was probably watching Gettysburg now that I think about it. But the bag of Little Ground Top was right there in the thing. Anyway, 82 Steinway Avenue here in Gettysburg when you come to town, or addressinggettysburg.com/cafe.
The Gettysburg Museum of History, located right here in the center of Gettysburg, PA. Owner and curator Eric Dorr grew up here and has spent his life collecting and preserving history through artifacts ranging from the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, World War II, presidential items, pop culture, and more. His museum is free and open to visitors Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 5 p.m., where you can stop by and immerse yourself in some of the most amazing artifacts that you would never believe exist in the middle of Gettysburg. If you're a fan of Band of Brothers and Everything Easy Company, you'll love his exhibit featuring the Dick Winters collection and artifacts from D-Day. You can even own your own piece of history by buying one of the many relics they have for sale in the museum and on the website gettysburgmuseumofhistory.com. The Gettysburg Museum of History is a non-profit 501c3 organization with a foundation that allows all purchases and donations to keep the museum operating and open free of charge. They have been featured on the History Channel, the Travel Channel, the Smithsonian Channel, and the Science Channel. Now you can check them out on American Artifact, the series on the YouTube channel, The History Underground. So that's the Gettysburg Museum of History at 219 Baltimore Street or the gettysburgmuseumofhistory.com.
At Digital History Pioneers Foundation, we are about grassroots history on digital platforms. That means we are about podcasters, documentarians, YouTubers, and even TikTokers. All of these creators are out there trying to share their love of history with the public. They don't need ideas, they need funding, both from viewers and corporate donors. DH Pioneer's initial funding focus is on the Civil War era, with a special emphasis on the Addressing Gettysburg podcast. So be a vital part of the unique content Addressing Gettysburg has in store by donating at dhpioneers.com and help bring your love of history to the people. Digital History Pioneers is an IRS Section 501c3 approved charitable corporation that makes any donation tax deductible to the fullest extent of the law.
I can't imagine being in a basement in that town and hearing that for 2 hours.
Yeah.
If you're just hearing
3 days.
like 3 days, but just the cannonade for 2 hours, like you're hearing the skirmishing, you're hearing all the,
You're an adult.
right.
Imagine being a kid.
Imagine.
Right.
You know, 43% of the people living in this town were under the age of 18.
Yes.
I'm surprised more people, as civilians, weren't killed. We stayed in the Sherfy house this year for a few days, and you know they haven't patched up the bullet holes.
Yeah.
And we were the bullet, you know, these mini balls went through 3 and 4 walls. You know, a couple, 2 and 3 doors, and into the closet, and you know, the house is literally riddled with. It's across from the peach orchard. I thought when lead hit, it just kind of flattened out, and that was it. But man, these things go through many walls.
Let's speak of that. The rafters that are at the museum and the center from the 40s.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yes.
Yeah, artillery shot.
I can't even.
No, and you're in there with your family, thinking you're safe, and then that comes flying through.
Yeah, no.
And but to me, if I were there, the sound I know that's what I wouldn't lose for the rest of my life. I would hear that forever, and that would, every time I'd hear something like it, it would send me back.
And you maybe got animals down there with you too.
Oh, my puppy.
Yeah.
Oh.
But going back to the cow,
Major puppy.
Little major.
That was money. Horses were in that house with you.
Oh yeah, the horses.
But going back to the soldiers on both sides, they're not in a cellar where it's dark.
No.
Right.
They're out in the open air. They can hear the dead sounds coming over them or through them or alongside them. In some cases with the Confederates, they can see what's happening to that guy to my left.
Yeah.
And, you know, Jeremiah Gage, that story as well.
Yeah.
And so many other things are going on that this infantry's having to take this for 2 hours. And they can't go anywhere. They can't do anything. In the heat, by the way.
Yeah.
It's hot. So yeah, this is well, and the smoke, so you can't see it clearly. You can only hear it.
It's also
Right.
not their first rodeo.
Yeah, that's
Well,
true.
I was thinking that too, right?
The heat
Right.
index at the time was, it was like 105 was it feels like that day.
Yeah, I was just, Bethany, what you said, I was thinking the same thing too. We just got to put it into a little context, because for a lot of these guys, they're 2 years into doing this.
Right.
Like, we're like, oh my God, because we've never experienced it. But in some instances, having said that though, there's definitely an impact on Pickett's Charge here, because like you said, Mike, the infantry is taking it. They're taking it and they're taking these casualties before they even step off. So think of what that does.
How you can sit there and have this happen to you and be this scared, but eventually by 2 years in, 3 years in,
Right.
you have to suddenly, it's like being a doctor in a trauma unit.
Yeah.
You have to suddenly start thinking to yourself, I have to take the emotion out or I will go crazy.
Yeah.
I think you're resigned to your fate at that point.
Yeah.
Because
Who's
you
the
care
guy
so
in
much.
Band of Brothers who talks to
Spears.
Spears.
He's like,
He said, "You're
your
already
problem
dead."
is you're
That's
gonna make it
that's
out.
what
You're thinking about going home, you're already dead
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I wonder if it was like going through in slow motion because your brain, like right before you have an accident, it seems like
Actually,
your whole life goes in front of you. It's like,
last anniversary we did a show, and we had Fran Fiac on, and he's a retired medical professional, and he does a really nice talk on Pickett's Charge, and he goes through what the body might have been going through, and he says that it was probably like slow motion, and he relates it to a car accident.
Well, we have at least one account, and I forget who somebody where they says it was like a kaleidoscope. Now to us, that's, an old school reference. What the hell does a kaleidoscope really mean? But you think of it from their perspective, their version of TV and movies, a kaleidoscope, just things coming at you, and the colors and the senses and all of that. And that's what it was. to
Right,
them.
all that stuff
Yeah.
flying at you.
Yeah.
And it's also a different time though.
Did I ever tell you, I was out in Spangler Spring walking a couple years ago just in the early fall. And I am walking and I heard a noise coming. And all of a sudden, I didn't fully know what it was, but all of a sudden I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a bullet coming at me. And as I turned, I didn't know why I wanted to turn back instead of looking forward. This bullet came flying down at my foot. You know where at Spangler Spring you have the bathroom? So you're up on that little ridge. And I'm up, it was deer season. And I'm up on the avenue walking. I heard the whizzing of a bullet that I had never heard before. Reminded me of like when you break a bone, you know you break a bone.
Yeah.
Well, I never heard a bullet before, but I knew it was a bullet. And as soon as I turned, it was about a foot from my foot, but went right into the
ground.
The question is, was it a movie bullet sound?
No. Take that back now.
Was it a, all right.
Yeah.
Talking about how you said about the sound, you tried to capture it.
Yeah.
There was a noise, it's a noise that I've never heard in
Yeah.
my life ever before.
Yeah,
But I
hopefully
heard
never
it,
again.
and I knew what it was. I instantly knew it was a bullet. There should never have been a bullet 5 years ago on Spangler Spring around lunchtime.
Yeah. That was.
At all. But anyway, I just pondered that, like thinking about, and again, I love the history. I was born and raised here, and I ponder all the time. I'm like, what has happened right here where I am? Right by that well, right by this little ridge. Everything that, the little party field that's right around.
Yeah.
And you just ponder like the whizzing.
The massive amount coming at you.
I had one bullet at me. I cannot imagine the massive.
I thought you were going to say it was a ghost bullet, and I was ready to turn this whole thing off.
The woman in white, I think that's where we all thought this was going.
What I think we're also placing in your mind is
I'm glad it didn't hit you.
these guys for 3
By the way,
years.
wait, I'm sorry, Tom, real quick. Chris actually grew up here. So she's, I think, the only person in this room that grew up here, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So she grew up with you kind of did?
Yeah, I'm a local girl.
Well, what's this then?
Well, I'm a local girl on the other side of the mountain, but I worked here.
Okay, all right. Okay. So you could get over here when you wanted to. All right, so we got 2 people who grew up here.
1.5.
And I like because you're kind of new to appreciating all of this stuff.
Oh, I was like you, right? You were here. Well, no, I've been doing this for like years now. That the love of the history. But I had Charles Rosenstiel was a step. So I have the Rosenstiel, and I'm a Quaker. So I have all this history in me and around me, and I didn't even capture it until I was a grown adult.
So so growing up, you weren't even aware of it.
Charles Rosenstiel, he's the little round top Rosenstiel. They're the ones who did all the Mason work.
Where the brothel
They're the ones-
was.
Yeah, they're the ones who signed the bullets and everything.
You had to
So
mention
what-
that.
You know, following it. But I was taken on battlefield tours with him as a little girl.
Yeah.
Back on Spangler Spring, I lived like 2 blocks from Spangler Spring. I'd ride my bike out there all the time, every day you could as a little kid. And the battleground was my playground.
Yeah.
And I was out there all the time. But, today, what I realized is it gets inside you even before you have head knowledge. But it just sears your soul
Yeah.
by being here, being on a boulder, just pondering sometimes, as you're walking, even if you're out there just to exercise.
I like that.
It gets inside
you before you have the head knowledge. That's good. All right, I interrupted you guys. You were talking. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was bringing this back to the soldier's experience, and my indication is, as I study this and I look at it, is definitely flight, right? It's not fight.
Yeah.
But as we said, these are hardened soldiers.
Veterans.
They've been through this, and I got a feeling as you're receiving this cannonade on both sides, I feel like there's a feeling in there where the soldier has to almost feel like, I just want to, if you're on the Confederate, I just want to move forward. Let me move forward. I can stop this. I don't want to go back. I want to go forward. And on the Union side, it's come get it.
Yeah, bring
it. Thanks, boys. Stop the cannons. Let's duke it out.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
At some point, I feel like as you're receiving this, it's enough is enough. Let's get it on.
So as
championship match.
One of
It's a shot at the title.
One of the things that never changes in the military, you know this, you don't want to be that guy that gets up and runs in front of all these guys that you've been with for years.
Especially
Yeah.
because everybody's from home.
Right, exactly.
Exactly, especially back then when
Right.
everyone was from the same town.
Right.
You have to live with that the rest of your life if you
And-
live.
And that's true. Well, that's true in every regiment on the battlefield. We always come to that analogy more often than not with Pickett's Charge. Right? There's
Yes,
just something
yes.
about the idea of this is the one where, like you said, I'm not going to run. My cousin's over here and my neighbor and the guy I went to school with. We always come back to that analogy with Pickett's Charge. And it ties back to what we said at the beginning. The memory, the romanticism, whatever you want to call it, is stronger with this than
Yeah.
the other parts of the
We don't see
battlefield.
Fredericksburg like that.
Yeah, right.
No.
You don't see Cold Harbor like that.
Right.
which was-
No, but all the same notions were there.
You're right.
You
They all
didn't
should be
want to
there.
run.
It's the
Yeah.
same-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it go back to?
Of backing out because nobody wanted to have like letters
Lose
at home
face.
that they were
Yeah,
shot in the back.
exactly right.
That's yeah.
Right.
Yep.
They call it a coward.
Yep.
I also do
World
think
would be over.
a lot of this comes up because this battle was fought where? On northern
Pennsylvania.
soil.
Pennsylvania soil.
It was a northern soil battle, whereas all the other battles, if your memory is how much devastation was done to Virginia, how much devastation was done in the South, and then this battle is up here it's such a major battle. You're on northern soil. I think that's where a lot of our romanticism comes
Yeah.
from. Is it comes from just that? It's
So it's romantic for the North because they stopped
I think so.
Bobby Lee, and it's romantic for the South because they were brave enough to take the war into enemy territory. And even though they lost, they fought valiantly, and it wasn't about slavery. Right.
Did you ever hear when Eisenhower brought Montgomery here?
Yeah.
He was explaining to him about Pickett's Charge. So Montgomery looked at him and said, "And they went?"
Yeah.
And he couldn't.
Yeah.
He couldn't believe.
Yeah. I couldn't believe Montgomery hadn't read about this battle before coming here.
I can.
He might have understood it in.
It's
There-
difficult.
No, I know.
There's been a lot more Gettysburg books since Monty's time.
That's
so
true,
you figure
that's
out
true.
too,
Who
right?
came up with the phrase,
Right.
the high watermark of the Confederacy? Who came up with that?
Yeah. You
Is
guys
it a
want to?
Southern thing? No.
Not
No.
really. Yeah, who wants to tackle that? We heard his name earlier.
John Batchelor.
Yeah, yeah.
But see,
Yeah.
he was working
with a Southern guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now,
What, Robinson? Is that his name?
Robbins, yeah.
Robbins.
Yeah, Robbins.
And he's a Southern guy, and he's looking at it from his perspective, but nobody ever remembers him.
Yeah. Well, there's also.
You did.
Yeah, thanks. You
Well, I
just did.
transferred
Yeah.
his
Oh, cool.
Robbins,
Yeah.
Robbins is fascinating. Fascinating guy.
Tell us about
Yeah,
that.
tell us.
I could go into Robbins all by myself, but that guy was pretty cool. But he was. But what he does at Antietam is actually probably more impressive than what he does here in actual command. So,
Well, keep it to here.
Yeah.
but no, I think you're right. Robbins,
Yeah.
because Batchelder's not getting a lot of cooperation from the Southerners when he's writing,
Right.
but he's getting cooperation from Robbins.
Yeah,
That's
and
a
if that
huge
guy hadn't been there, the interpretation would be completely different.
Well, do we think, getting this back to the high water mark, do we think the account of Batchelder going on the field with Pickett's staff officer Harrison and supposedly being told the copse of trees, what was it, do we agree? Do we buy this?
That it's the high
legend?
water mark?
Yeah.
Not Barksdale?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It should be Vermont. It should be Vermont where the Confederates robbed the bank.
Yeah.
That's a lot more north than Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, that's true.
But that's all part of the legend of Pickett's Charge, right? Supposedly Pickett's staff officers are telling Batchelder, oh, you know, these trees, they were our guiding landmark across the field. Longstreet is in an art studio with, what's the guy's name, Walker, who does the repulsive Longstreet's assault. They're doing a painting. Longstreet reportedly says, well, this is where my assault reached its high water mark or something like that. So there's a lot of factors that go into that.
That's a point.
That's a point.
All right, so let's progress a little along here because we're at hour 4 already. Can you believe it?
Are we hour 4?
Yeah.
What time is it?
It's 8 o'clock. 2 hours. We're at 2 hours. that's math. It's Catholic school math.
All right. Like
so-
it's 11 o'clock. What?
Yeah. So all right, so we've got we're talking about going across the field. The artillery is flying in your face, and you got your shells and your case shot and everything, and then you get closer, and now you're in. What is the range of canister? 400 yards,
Give or take.
roughly.
Yeah.
So 400 yards, they could start firing that at you. 300 something yards is muskets, right?
Give her 350-ish.
350-ish?
Yeah.
So now you're getting them all. Everything's flying at you.
Yep.
How many people do you think made it over the Emmitsburg Road?
Well, that's
Numbers, Jim.
Yes.
Yeah.
Write this down.
So this is this is hotly debated. So you can get a multiple choice answer on this. 12,000. Let's say we accept 12,000 step off.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, less than half make it across the Emmitsburg Road.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. There are people who will say considerably less than that. There are some people, and I'm not going to mention names, who would argue more than half make it across the Emmitsburg Road. I think at best, half of them do, and I think
Based on
probably
what?
less. Well, that's it. We don't have any numbers, so what do we know? We have accounts indicating the stragglers and walking wounded are increasing in great numbers. In some cases, they talk about what looked like entire squads and entire companies falling back. We have that. We know ultimately the numbers who break into the Union defenses is probably in the range of hundreds. So what happens to a lot of those guys?
Right.
On the other hand, we have the Elliott burial map. They would seem to show hundreds of graves on the correct side, the east side of the Emmitsburg Road, which would tend to indicate those men probably fell.
So it's just a shooting gallery at that
So
point.
I think you can split the difference and say about half, but we really have no way of knowing. Anybody who tells you they know is a liar. We don't know.
Do they count prisoners?
Yeah, right. Do you count the prisoners? Each one of those would go back
They
and
say get up and cross the road and come over here.
Yeah,
Over on the
right.
other side of the fence.
We have accounts from Pettigrew's side of the field that indicates they get across the road. Trimble kind of suggests his 2 brigades don't really get past the road. So there's maybe 2 brigades right there that don't get to the other side of the road.
Okay.
We know by the time Pickett's 3 brigades get to the Emmitsburg Road and get to the field and get to the stone wall. Somebody describes it as looking like an organized mob. So how many of those are still here and how many of them have gone back? So I'm gonna say half, but we really don't know.
Okay. Half. But we really don't know.
We really don't know.
I like that.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else as the Pickett's Charge continues and falls apart, and any other thought, Mike?
Yeah, I think there's one phrase on the battlefield that always makes me shudder. It's that phrase on Cowan's Battery monument. Double canister at 10 yards.
Yes.
I love that monument.
At 10 yards.
Yards.
Yeah. That's six guns shooting double canister at a target 10 yards away.
Yeah.
That's the stone wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
How many
that infantry that's made it across the road, who are opposite of Cowan's Battery, in a moment.
That's the pink mist.
You can't go by the Elliott map and the burials because they don't exist anymore.
Yeah, right.
Some of those guys
That's
were,
right.
yeah,
They were gone,
vaporized.
yeah.
Bits and pieces.
Yep.
Pulverized.
Yep.
Pulverized.
So that was the order for the cutting of the fuse.
Tender.
Yeah, that was the order for the round and for the elevation.
Yeah.
You're making for 10 yards.
Yep.
Double canister.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I mean, there's the great shot in the movie of them shooting off the canister and.
And they just flew backwards. Those
Yeah,
guys.
yeah.
The old
Yeah,
the
they
guy
did the same.
with the
I
cannon.
mean, they had the catapult to go.
Yeah.
Does it show them flying back or does it just cut?
No, he flies
No, the movie, there's one shot
Yeah.
where, a bunch of them goes back.
The one where it's like the guy runs up to the cannon and pulls the thing.
Yeah.
and
No
it just cuts.
Yeah.
So it's in your head that happened.
Yeah.
That was
Sure.
cushion.
Yeah, I know that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that shot, isn't that shot taken from behind the cannon, so they're blurred out by the
And
smoke?
it's just smoke.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a
And
good shot.
I think it's Garnett is riding up on it.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Garnett perspective, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
There's like in a scary movie, there's nothing more scary than what you don't see.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah,
And
yeah.
that is a brilliant moment in that movie.
Yeah. And by the way, who was in those shots that they never really call out?
Jim Hessler.
Henry Hunt.
Oh.
Before I died.
Before
That
your
would have been
time.
cool, right?
Yeah, it would have been cool.
I would
Yeah.
have wanted to play General Webb or something like that.
That would have been great. Well,
But
that was
Henry
Brian
Hunt.
Pohanka that played
Yeah, I
him,
know,
right?
well, I
Yeah.
know that. I'm
Yeah.
aware of that. But
Was Hunt riding up and down the line, or was he in one
well,
stationary spot?
they talk. I think initially he's going up and down the line, but they do talk about when the breakthrough is occurring in and around the copse of trees. Hunt is there with his revolver, shooting at him with his pistol, because he's kind of going, see him, and somebody, maybe Hancock's, I forget who, Cowan, somebody kind of ridicules him later and says, well, he looked really ridiculous doing that. But he's there doing the movie doing that. So just a little movie trivia for you guys,
Yeah.
Not that I was on set.
Now I gotta go
wasn't
watch
on
that
set.
again.
I wasn't on set.
I
Rich
think
Snyder.
it was Frank Haskell that ridiculed Hunt.
Yeah, maybe. Is that Haskell?
Because he's
Yeah.
he's yelling, see him, see him. And
Yeah.
he said, I'm watching him shoot with his pistol.
Yeah.
And Hunt actually had a horse shot out from under
That's
him.
right, he does. That's right, he does. Yeah.
All right. So I know we could sit and probably talk about this forever.
Yes.
But there's only so much memory on these cards and these cameras, so we do have to shorten it. There is more to the Battle of Gettysburg,
Yeah.
obviously, than just the end of Pickett's Charge. That is the movie version. Real quick, fill out the rest of the day.
Oh,
July 3rd, that is what this episode is about.
okay.
Just fill it out. We didn't get to our boy Custer.
No, we didn't. Recharge those memory cards. Let's go.
Take a break. Come back. Come on.
We don't,
Patrick.
the poor seminary people have been here all day, guys. We got to let them go home. So, real quick though, finish out the day. By the way, Jim and I do have an episode, I believe, about East Cavalry Field.
We do, yeah.
From a couple of
Yeah.
years ago, which you can
Yeah.
go back and find.
Back in the archives.
Yeah, it's somewhere
Yeah.
back there. But go ahead, fill out the rest of the day
No pressure. So,
in 30 seconds.
Pickett's Charge comes to a close. It's late in the afternoon. Meade rides down his lines. The men are cheering. Everybody knows they've just given Bobby Lee a beating. Meade will ride up the Little Round Top, meet with some of the high command from the 5th Corps, maybe a little bit of the 6th Corps. Meade will order a reconnaissance in force to be pushed forward from his left to possibly convert into a real attack, but it's getting late in the day. The reconnaissance is slow to gather, slower to push forward. They run into a little Confederate resistance in and around Houck's Ridge and Rose's Woods, and they don't push them any farther. So any idea from the Union perspective of launching a major counterattack in the wake of Pickett's charge kind of dies with that. Somebody mentioned Kilpatrick. I do want to point out in that same sector, we have the fight at South Cavalry Field, which will be Farnsworth's men of Kilpatrick's division, basically trying to make an incursion into Longstreet's right flank. That will basically fail. And ironically, more or less in terms of major actions, the Battle of Gettysburg ends with a Confederate tactical victory. But in the big picture, we know July 3rd has been a massive defeat for Robert E. Lee. And one thing I do want to leave everybody with, because, you got to choose, are you a first day person? Are you a second day person? Are you a third day person? Something Wayne Motz said to me many, many years ago when I was just starting out that has stuck with me. Yes, July 3rd is the turning point, because it is at the end of this day that Robert E. Lee realizes he no longer has the ability to wage offensive operations. He had it after the first, he had it after the second, he doesn't have it after July 3rd. So whether you think July 3rd is anticlimactic or whatever, you can make the case that it's a turning point and therefore perhaps the most significant day at the Battle of Gettysburg.
That's pretty good. Okay. All right, now.
It was the Tet Offensive of the Civil War.
Yeah, right.
So my father and I still get into this conversation. It started way back when Lincoln wrote a letter to Meade and put it in his drawer and didn't send it.
Yeah.
Some people to this day still think Meade should have and could have pursued Lee, got him up against the river and destroyed him, or done whatever and destroyed him. But I don't agree with that. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. Is this the retreat anniversary episode? Should we?
We're now transitioning into tomorrow's episode.
Which I'm hinting we should do. We should do that.
We'll come to the studio and do it. I can't do this again.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you, and I would not agree with the critics. And I think that's another thing that has changed and evolved over the last 20 years.
Yes.
People are very more pro-Meade than they were 20 years ago. Now, there are a number of battles and skirmishes on the way back to Virginia, in Hagerstown and all these other ones. So it's not like Meade, quote unquote, fails to pursue. It just doesn't happen aggressively enough, fast enough, whatever term you want to use, to prevent Lee from getting away. And ultimately, that's the source of Lincoln's disappointment.
Okay.
Probably his wording and what he said.
Yeah.
Chase them off our territory.
Well, there is that.
It's all our country.
Yeah.
Right, it's all our,
Yeah.
Beth, go ahead, and then we're going to...
Some of Lincoln's animosity towards Meade and his not pursuing Lee like he thought he should have harkened back to George McClellan and McClellan's inability to move. I mean, is that playing with Lincoln in his mind?
I think you have a perception that the Army of the Potomac and these West Pointers are just slow. And again, perception isn't always reality, but I think you have that perception. The Army of the Potomac and these West Pointers are slow, and I just can't get them to move fast enough and do what I think should be done. So I do think there's a little bit of that play into them too.
Okay. So what we've been doing at the end of all of these, or did we do it last time? I think we might have forgotten. We did? Okay. So who is everybody's MVP for July 3rd? Some people think this is an unfair question, Jim.
Okay, really?
Some people say
really?
You can't just pick one.
Okay.
So we'll go in the back. I'm not, Emily. You're good? Okay. Are you good too? Oh, you're fine. Rich, who's your MVP?
The last time, day two, I split it between Hancock and me because I had in my mind who I think is the MVP for the Army of the Potomac on day three. I think it's Henry Hunt.
Henry Hunt. Very good. Okay.
That would come up.
Henry Hunt for you too.
was an artilleryman. That's why.
Oh, okay.
I had a feeling that would happen a lot.
Okay, good. Matt,
I'm not gonna go with Hancock, but,
speak up a little, please, if you don't mind.
I'm not going with Hancock, but, I think that, the underestimation of Alonzo Cushing's position on that field. Because he didn't want to leave and he stayed, and we all, I don't know whoever heard that episode, but the late, great,
Rick Schrader?
Mr. Schroeder, yeah, he described Alonzo Cushing's influence that day in great detail, and I never knew that.
Yeah.
And to be a 19 or 20-year-old kid
Yeah.
in charge of an entire artillery battery and to do that says something. And with the wounds he sustained,
Yeah.
we all know.
Holding your balls in your hand?
So
Is this a family show?
Not anymore.
He's one of my heroes right there.
All right, that's good. Bo, do you have one?
Walter Taylor, of course.
How about you, Chris? Do you have?
Concur.
Okay. Good. Bethany Yingling.
I think I'm by this discussion, being persuaded that Hunt should get this.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
You're not sure. Are you on the do you have like a couple of choices?
Yeah,
Yeah, name one of them.
I'll go with Hunt for right now.
All right.
Okay. Okay.
Same.
Hunt, you like the artillery, especially when you can hear it 150 miles away. Beth?
Hunt.
Hunt?
I want to say one thing here.
If you say Robbins.
I got more questions right on the guide exam by reading Hessler and Mott's Pickett's Charge book.
Ooh.
And by reading.
Wow! And Ron,
On sale,
you
wherever
can
fine books
read
are
it.
sold.
I
Yeah.
probably did that.
Well, thank you, Mike.
Then by reading Coddington.
Oh!
You son of a bitch. Yeah.
Blasphemy.
And I owe somebody $5 now. So, yeah.
For those of you who are new here, Coddington is like the guy who wrote the Bible for licensed battlefield guides. That's it.
We have a
Okay.
technical problem. We lost that last 2 minutes. On
Well, you just saved me $5. All right.
a small fee of $50.
Your MVP.
Based on reading that book, Hunt.
Okay.
Hancock.
Hancock.
Meade.
Meade.
For letting Hunt do what he did.
Yeah.
All right, yeah.
Joe Jones and Sam Smith and any other guy that did their duty.
Common guy.
Oh, the
I like
common
it.
soldier. I like that.
The infantrymen who didn't die at the end of the day.
The ones who
Right.
the ones who survived are the MVP. Glenn?
Meade.
Meade?
Yeah.
I'm tossed between Hunt and Alonzo Cushing.
Okay. But artillery guys.
All right.
Jeffrey.
I have to go Meade just to go back to, we held Culp's Hill for 7 hours that morning. We lost sight of that today.
We did lose sight of
You
that.
did, yeah. Jeffrey.
Who put two Jeffs next to
I
each
don't know.
other?
I thought Brandon would sit in between you two.
Why, so we balance
So,
out, or you two?
I'm an
No,
argument.
no, 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 no. Jeff Pass. No. His is Geoffrey.
Oh, I take
Yeah.
it back.
The original way.
No, no, listen here, Toys R Us. You don't get to have your name stuck.
All right.
So, my MVP is, of course, the only one with a cannon for an arm, Joshua Allen.
Yep.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
Bills.
Oh,
That is,
the
that is
quarterback.
a
Yes.
Buffalo Bills reference.
Of course.
It is, of course, Henry Hunt.
Henry Hunt.
Hank Hunt. Okay. Brandon, you got one yet?
Greg?
Greg.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Whoa. You meant Custer? You meant Custer. Okay. Sorry, but then no, Greg is wow.
Or are you talking about your neighbor, Greg?
Oh.
I think it was a team effort, but I think from day 2, George Green
Oh, yeah.
set up an MVP for day 3.
Okay. All right. All right.
Meade.
So I've had time to think about this.
Okay.
I knew Hunt would be a popular choice. I actually thought about going with the common man, so I won't do that. So I'm going to pick somebody whose name never came up tonight. 12th Corps, Alpheus Williams.
Oh.
For getting the ball rolling and starting to shell the hell, as they
That's
put
good.
it. Shell the hell out of the lower end of Culp's Hill, and the day just goes downhill for Lee from there.
Yeah, that's good.
All right, so I'm going to go
How about you,
Williams.
Dan? Do you have one?
Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain.
Yeah.
Listen, so
He took a good
That's
nap.
right.
Yeah.
He did take a good nap.
How about you, Court, back there?
I have to go with Henry Hunt.
Henry Hunt?
Longtime respecter of Henry Hunt.
All right, my MVP is Jim Hessler
Oh,
for doing
great,
for doing this episode
Thank you.
with us. And thank you very much for your time, Jim.
Thank you for having me and for inviting
Absolutely.
me. This was a lot of fun.
I always have fun with Jim, and
even though we hate each other,
we hate each other so much.
Yeah,
But we put it aside
it's right for the cameras.
for the cameras and for the microphones, just for moments like this.
Angle and shake hands.
You gotta do
We
that.
should do that. We should. Peace among podcasters.
Miracle. That's right. It's a Christmas miracle. Hand sanitizer, please.
Peace
please.
eternal in a podcast united. Okay, that's it for us here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you guys.
Thank you to the Seminary Ridge Museum and Education Center for letting us do this here. And thank you all for watching, and we hope to see you at one of our events sometime. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Our hearts of stone have got us famed, for soon to know from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man for debt shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa, we'll drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail. No man for debt shall go to jail from Gary Owen in glory.
Thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, we have a lot more content for you over at patreon.com/Addressing Gettysburg. Also, you can make a tax-deductible donation to help support more videos like this at dhpioneers.com.